Xenoblade 2 is a JRPG masterclass in storytelling and rewarding game mechanics, provided you dare to be curious, and thankfully many of you are. It is the best-selling entry of a phenomenal series, its main protagonists were among the most requested for Smash Bros., and after their inclusion in the announcement of a sequel, the fanbase is stronger than it has ever been. Despite these accolades though, it is often misconstrued into the shadow of the original. Due to divisive changes from its predecessors and scars from a hectic development cycle, it received the least amount of critical acclaim, and its haters will not hesitate to make themselves known. Not to mention, for some people, it is much too easy to dismiss at face value. But although its taste might have to get used to, it has continued to age like fine wine. Today, after almost 5 years, I'm finally going to give every reason to be curious. This is an in-depth analysis of Xenoblade 2, or at least everything I find noteworthy. I'll largely be discussing in chronological order, so no need to worry about unexpected spoilers. If you're looking for something more digestible and completely spoiler-free, check out my retrospective on the series as a whole. Everything I cover here will have a spoiler-free timestamp in the description below. Without further ado, enjoy the adventure. Alrest is a sea of clouds, where titans encompass a world tree at its center. These titans serve as a habitat for smaller creatures, and while they are capable of long lives, they will eventually perish beneath the clouds. The world tree is said to be home to an unlikely hope, Elysium, a fabled paradise where mankind once lived with a divine creator known as the Architect. As implausible as it may be, this legend still has a believer in Rex. Rex is a young boy who resides on a titan named Azurda, or simply Gramps. With no parents by his side, he makes his living as a salvager, with the latest haul being a tutorial. When standing still, the player will auto-attack in sets of 3. A successful hit will gradually charge techniques called arts, this one in particular spawning health potions on the field. This is the bare minimum of combat, but I already have a tip. Auto-attacking can instantly be cancelled with mere movements, and it's much faster to charge arts by stutter-stepping than waiting it all out. After that hiccup, Rex arrives at the Argentum Trade Guild in order to sell his salvaged goods and send most of the cash back to his village. There, he is unexpectedly offered the job of a lifetime by the guild chairman, Banna. For a whopping 200,000 gold, all Rex has to do is lend his salvaging skills to a group of drivers and blades. A blade is a powerful life form whose very existence is tied to their driver. Despite some aggressive hazing, Rex accepts the job against his grandpa's wishes. This is when the player is given the freedom to explore Argentum, and I've gotta say, it is the ideal place to start things off. It showcases the diverse cultures in Alrest, its music is a promise of a fantastic soundtrack, and its level design sparks exploration without being too open from the get-go. Take note of how much vertical space is forming the guild. This isn't a coincidence. A common criticism of Xenoblade 2 is its navigation system. The map and quest marker provide a general illustration instead of carving a clear path forward. This can particularly get troublesome when it comes to a difference in elevation, making Argentum a great place for the player to grow accustomed to it. Hell, the first side quest available is a game of hide and seek where the targets are ironically labeled on the map. This is because it isn't about where they're hiding, it's about the player practicing how to observe and maneuver through a vertically dense environment. Naturally, Argentum houses a plethora of shops that sell your typical JRPG equipments as well as pouch items. Pouch items give buffs that last a certain length of time, and they are surprisingly accessible for how effective they can be. Their effects are even increased if you happen to use a preferred type of item, so really you would be foolish to ignore them. There's also the first of many inns. By completing side quests or discovering new areas, you will gain bonus EXP that is reserved for the inn. You essentially have control over your level, and I love that. No longer is there a fear of doing too much side content and being overleveled. And most importantly, this meant I never had to level grind. As long as you're not focusing solely on the story, there should be enough EXP to go around. Lastly, salvaging is an activity Rex can perform at various locations. Succeeding in a few button prompts will increase the chances of valuable treasure, while failure may provoke an unwanted guest. Now that we've gotten our bearings, we can depart for our mission where Rex is once again harassed by one of his clients, Nia. Unlike her humble blade, Dromark, Nia doubts Rex for being young in spite of her own youthful appearance. Rex isn't one to back down either, so expect these two to bicker every now and then. In their first genuine conversation, Rex explains that his aspiration for Elysium stems from his desire for a place everyone can call home. Though she rejects the idea of a paradise, Nia gains respect for Rex's benevolence. What you are witnessing right now is an early peek at Monolith Soft's excellent storytelling. The dialogue is focusing on Rex, but right under your nose, even if it isn't out loud, it is actually saying a lot more about Nia. Subtle foreshadowing is a trademark of this series, and once we enter spoiler territory, I'll make sure it is fully appreciated.
I'm not sure I catch your drift, but this Grumps of yours sounds alright.
Huh.
And you're alright too, kid. Not that different from me.
At their destination, Rex ends up salvaging an entire ship and is ordered to follow his clients into it. The ship makes for a short and sweet dungeon, with its main lesson being how aggressive enemies can be when in sight. Without a blade, Rex is the deadweight of the team, but luckily he shouldn't be catching the attention. The party member with the most aggro is the one who will be targeted, and aggro is typically determined by the amount of damage dealt and the types of arts used. Rex wasn't brought along for no reason though. The group's efforts are put to a halt until he is mysteriously able to open the way. Locked inside is who Jin and Malos recognize as the Aegis, while Rex lets out an appropriate reaction. The glow of the sword's emerald is tempting to Rex's touch, leading to Jin murdering him in cold blood. Nia is left shaken by the incident, while her partners continue as planned. Rex awakens in a field, with the Aegis staring out at the sound of a distant church bell. Upon noting a core crystal as the mark of a blade, she introduces herself as Pyra and claims this place to be a memory of her home, Elysium. Rex understandably flips out when realizing he's dead, but Pyra reconciles with a deal. She will revive him with half of her life force if he promises to bring her to the real Elysium. Rex accepts by touching her chest in a non-sexual manner, resurrecting himself with her sword in hand and a fragment of her crystal inside. Malos orders Nia to kill all of the bystanders, but is disrupted by the flames of the Aegis. Rex enters the scene and defends everyone from Malos with his first fight alongside Pyra. And, well, it also happens to be the first instance of a weak tutorial. I hate to suspend the action, but this is imperative to address, seeing as it is the game's most notorious flaw. Xenoblade 2 was designed to have faith in the player. Information is either given in terribly brief tutorials or from sporadic interactions with NPCs. This philosophy works wonders for a myriad of games, but those games have mechanics that are pretty straightforward and intuitive, if not outright familiar. The combat in Xenoblade 2, however, is immensely distinct, even when compared to its predecessors. Therefore, many players will be confused, perhaps frustrated, or even spread misinformation, which I'll get to later. I honestly think the whole series has lackluster tutorials, but what is unforgivable about 2 is the glaring omission of a tutorial menu. This is especially bizarre considering the number of fruitful quality of life updates and the inclusion of such a menu in the story DLC. To put it bluntly, this was not the game to have faith in the player, or at least not that much faith. For the time being, I'll be holding off on blade combat since there's a better opportunity soon. Whew, after that mood killer, we're treated to one of many superb action sequences. After Rex is overpowered, Nia steps in to play defense, and Pyra takes matters into her own hands. Malos and Jin's ship has an untimely arrival and would have caused Nia to plummet to her death if it wasn't for Rex. And just when it seems like they're down on their luck, here comes Gramps to save the day as our heroes climb on and barely escape into the night. Seriously, it's impossible for me to watch this scene without getting goosebumps. What an exhilarating way to leave the player anticipating the encounters that await. Boobs aside, Rex has a rude awakening due to everyone but Pyra being missing. They're able to find Gramps nearby, but unfortunately, they're too late. Gramps succumbs to the injuries from the escape, leaving Rex to cope with yet another loss of a parental figure. Just kidding, Gramps is fine, he just has to grow up all over again. With Gramps in our helmets, we're off to search for Nia and Dromark, and what I find to be one of the most gorgeous areas in the game. It's a short-lived, yet visually impactful glimpse at the world of Alrest. The party reunites with a slightly better tutorial than before, so let's dive into combat with blades. The line connecting driver and blade indicates their affinity, a weak blue light when it's low and a fierce golden light at maximum. Affinity will increase by staying close together and performing well in battle. Doing so will lead to many perks, such as a quicker recharge of driver arts and a higher chance of blade arts. A driver's arts are determined by their blade's weapon class, each with 4 upgradable arts that can be interchanged. Meanwhile, rather than being directly controlled, blades automatically support their drivers by granting occasional buffs with their own arts. They also have other capabilities that can all be enhanced by their affinity chart. This is basically a skill tree that is progressed by clearing often minor objectives. Unlocking the next level usually requires trust, which is gained via a multitude of favorable interactions with the blade. As you can see by the colors, the chart is divided into 3 categories. Battle skills permanently improve battle efficiency, field skills we'll get to later, and last but not least, specials. Specials are an elemental blade attack that must be charged by using arts. Unlike arts though, specials can charge up to level 4, which is crucial when ensuing a blade combo. When using a special, a combo tree will appear on the top right of the screen. The first step requires at least a level 1 special, the second a level 2 special, and finally a level 3. Since there's currently a lack of blades, the most practical path is fire, water, fire. We're not in it alone after all, other party members will signify when they are ready to continue a combo. There is a time limit for each step, but sometimes it's best to run out the clock in order to start fresh. Once complete, the combo will make itself known with a fancy name, slow-mo, and button prompts that are oh so satisfying. In addition to damage, the combo will force a seal that prevents the enemy from taking a certain action. Keep in mind, these seals can't be stacked, only the seal of the latest combo will apply. After hopefully a learning experience, the gang decides to take a well-deserved rest. Pyra and Gramps acknowledge their shared history with Malos and Jin, and although Gramps is wary of Rex's role in all of this, Pyra promises to take care of him. In the morning, Nia gives a proper welcome to her home titan, Gormott, full of luscious greenery that fueled a recent conquest by the Empire of Mor Ardain. Gormott's main city, Torigoth, is pretty easy to spot, but it's even easier to get lost in such a breathtaking world. The developers at Monolith Soft are masters at designing worlds that inspire the ambition to explore, and the grassy plains of Gormott are just a taste. So what awaits you in Alrest? Well, we've got dazzling sights, collectibles for side quests and crafting, treasure chests of various sizes, and of course, the wonderful creatures that inhabit...
I'm all out of juice.
Okay, so Torigoth, right? Unique monsters are essentially super bosses that roam the overworld. Though their names go from stupendous to plain stupid, they will condition you to feel fear at the sound of their battle theme. It will become thrilling to discover and take them on, but for now they serve as a dose of reality. Ever since day 1, it has been written in Xenoblade law that running away is a valid strategy. Whether main or side quests, you are bound to run into enemies that far outmatch you. That's why health regenerates outside of battle, and death is a mere respawn at generous checkpoints. This giant ape known as Territorial Rotbart, yeah, it's in Xenoblade 1, it's tradition at this point. Other RPGs may have conditioned you to believe that a higher level symbolizes the wrong neighborhood, but in Xenoblade, the player is expected to improve at knowing when and how to avoid conflict. To give a head start, if running away isn't cutting it, try finding a climbable object. It's a foolproof method of escape, alleviating areas that are dense with enemies. With our bodies intact, we come to find that Torigoth is holding a recruitment for the Ardainian military with the one qualification of being a driver. Problem is, not everyone can become a driver, a lesson that has to be learned the hard way. Only someone with an inexplicable aptitude can resonate with a core crystal and awaken its blade. Thus, without the touch of a driver, a blade would never exist at all. Imagine being born in Alrest without this potential. That's gotta be so disheartening. It's like not being able to catch Pokemon. What a loser! This does raise a few questions about the Aegis, but there's no time to ponder when the army steps in to capture Nia. Due to a frighteningly accurate wanted poster, she's recognized as a member of a terrorist group named Torna. Despite the seriousness of the accusation, humor is assured in the presence of Ardainian soldiers, who are most well known for their hilarious voice lines.
Don't forget me! Take that!
Actually, I meant these ones.
Think you can take me! Don't forget me! Behave! You're done?
Since it is possible to battle a whole bunch of these soldiers, these voice lines were shortened to spare the ears. And while this may be objectively better game design, screw that! If you can't handle the absurdity, just turn off the battle dialogue, don't ruin it for the rest of us. Captain Podrick and his soldiers may be incompetent, but they're led by a blade who is almost as powerful as her cleavage. Brigid, the jewel of Mor Ardain. Though she isn't as potent without her driver, the strongest blade in the Empire proves to be an elusive challenge. Nia is successfully captured by the average Nintendo Switch user's kryptonite.
This is an Ethernet!
Blades are fueled by energy in the atmosphere called ether, so by restricting their ether supply, they're virtually powerless. Brigid's own weakness is exploited by a stray bullet, giving Rex and Pyra a reluctant opportunity to escape. Their clumsy savior turns out to be a young Nopon named Tora, with an innocent desire of making driver friends and a harsh reality of lacking the aptitude. They plan their next move at Tora's house, while Brigid reconvenes with her driver, Special Inquisitor Morag. Recognizing the Emerald Core Crystal as the Aegis, Morag is not content with letting her go. With Pyra's adorable disguise, our heroes learn that the talk of town is none other than Nia's execution, urging them to infiltrate a warship in order to rescue her. Doing so would require some serious firepower, so Tora suggests completing his highly anticipated artificial blade. Accruing the funds consists of straightforward tasks that are basically an excuse to get familiar with exploring. That's all fine and good, as long as you don't kill the baby Ardain in Torigoth. Aside from being cruel, its death will lock you out of grinding the best core crystals. Speaking of which, drivers can resonate with as many crystals as they can handle, an ability that is mainly portrayed by the gacha system. You know the deal, there's a bunch of common blades who are all generic, and there's an exclusive group of rare blades who have unique personalities, dedicated side quests, and higher potential in combat. Now, I'm not one to automatically hate on gacha, especially when it's free, but there are two issues with this system. Ordered by their potency, the three types of core crystals are common, rare, and legendary. If you were thinking a legendary would dramatically increase the odds in your favor, far from it! While the probability isn't disastrous, it is unreasonably stingy. There are boosters that increase the likelihood of elements, but let's be real, all players will care about is pulling rares. The true kick in the nuts though is the absence of an alternative. Unless you grind crystals, you will miss content to no fault of your own. This could have easily been reconciled by guaranteeing the remaining rares in the post-game. And yes, I do specifically mean the post-game, because believe it or not, I've gained a ton of enjoyment out of the gacha. Since I was pulling different blades each time, I felt compelled to try new strategies, and once I realized how many setups are viable, it considerably enriched my appreciation for the battle system. For instance, blades are classified as attackers, healers, or tanks. Many players will feel the need to assign each driver a single role as much as possible, but that's easier said than done. A blade can only switch drivers by using scarce items called overdrives. What seems like an arbitrary hurdle is steering you in the right direction. Instead of solely considering a blade's class or rarity, take a look at their elements, their battle skills, and their weapon arts, the latter of which differ on their current driver. The significance of these variables convey how thoughtful and flexible the battle mechanics are. The gacha also caused newfound appreciation. Ardain was a blade I long ignored because I already had my party figured out. But because I pulled her early this time, I ended up learning that I really like using her in combat, and I really like her as a character. I wouldn't have had these revelations if the game didn't encourage me to experiment with the cards I was dealt. And remember, it's encouraged, not forced. Not only does the gacha have a pity system, there are plenty of rare blades that are obtained through the main story and side quests. If you're not the type to dabble, these blades are more than enough to get the job done. Look, I know gacha is polarizing, but think of it this way. The gacha in Xenoblade 2 isn't the main course, it's the cherry on top. You may not find it delicious on its own, but it accentuates the bigger picture. Besides, pulling common blades shouldn't feel too bad because they are invaluable to supplying field skills. Blades aren't just helpful in battle, they will be crucial to exploration by clearing obstacles, unlocking treasure, and granting extraordinary traversal. These types of actions require a skill check, and if you pass, that's great. If not, well, at least they'll be kept track of on the map. Wait, can't I spam core crystals till I have infinite field skills? Not quite. The only blades who are considered in the skill check are the ones who are currently equipped, and a driver can only equip 3 blades at a time, including their default blade. So even if you do have the appropriate skills, you might have to navigate the menus before passing the skill check. The limitation makes sense, the implementation does not. It ultimately takes a few seconds, but if the player can check the top 3 skill levels for each driver in a few seconds, then the game should be able to do it in a fraction of a second. To make matters worse, despite there being a notification when a skill is upgraded, it won't actually upgrade until the affinity chart is open, so some players might not even have an accurate idea of their skill levels. These are my most desired quality of life changes, not because I despise field skills or the affinity charts, but because I love them! Much like an MMO, the previous Xenoblade entries have a surplus of run-of-the-mill side quests to avoid directionless grinding. These quests may seem missing in Xenoblade 2, but in truth they're recontextualized with the affinity charts. It's such an intelligent format that breathes new life into an obligatory checklist. In terms of presentation, seeing the chart gradually fill out is inherently satisfying, and in terms of progression, the improvements to your blade are more meaningful than EXP. Field skills are the greatest evidence. By completing these objectives, the player is uncovering more of Alrest in a way that characterizes blades, both as individuals and as integral components of the world. A blade can feel irreplaceable with a rare field skill alone, but thankfully, mandatory skill checks purely involve skills that already belong to a story blade, and/or are common amongst all blades. In fact, the game sets you up for success by ensuring the first core crystal is a common blade with Wind Mastery, one of the most useful field skills. Its weapon is also Knuckle Claws, so Rex can heal without Nia. Sorry Nia, we're coming, I promise! How about we demonstrate our blade expertise by making one of our own? An artificial blade that will strike fear into the heart of evil and leave the Ardainian army bending to our will.
How may I be of service, Master? Wait a minute!
This is Poppi. She may not be waifu, but she is truly best girl. It's not surprising her odd introduction was the work of a Napon. As cute as they are, appearances can be deceiving to say the least. Let's talk about Tora for a second. He's easily the least popular protagonist for being quite talkative with a high-pitched voice and evidently for being a perv. Although he is nowhere near my favorites, allow me to put things into perspective. Tora, who has had a depressingly lonely life, makes use of his technology to live out his private fantasies. In other words, he's behaving exactly as expected of a teenage boy, and if you're a male trying to deny this, you know you're wrong. The joke is akin to embarrassing things you did during puberty, or forgetting to delete your browser history. You don't have to find it funny like I did, but it's not a concern. After all, he keeps his kinks to himself, or at least he tries to. I, for one, find this refreshing compared to the abundance of anime characters who sexually harass women for humor, some of whom are beloved to this day. To me, Tora is like a little brother in that he may be annoying at times, but I feel the need to take care of him. His aspiration to make friends and be supportive is so pure, and let's not forget the whole reason he was building Poppi was in hopes of finding his estranged data pawn. So I can't help but have a soft spot for the little guy. You know what else I have a soft spot for? Tiger. I freaking hate this minigame, yet I am elated for its existence. Tiger is infamous for its difficulty, to the point that Monolith Soft patched in easy mode. As amusing as I find that, I can't talk. I will never forget when I was having a conversation about it and I unironically uttered the words, "You can attack in Tiger?" A minigame being tough is harmless by itself. What's troublesome is it being the main source of income for Poppi Swap. This is Poppi's exclusive capability to be customized in a nearly limitless fashion, but in order to prove a major point, I'm not explaining it. You might feel intimidated by how many systems there are in place, so it is of the utmost importance that you understand this. The Xenoblade series is full of activities and features that are definitely worth checking out, but are not worth stressing over. I have barely touched Poppi Swap because I never felt like Poppi was falling behind. She's perfect the way she is. To go a step further, I love Xenoblade X despite the fact I'm not confident enough to explain half of its mechanics. I guarantee there are many other Xenoblade fans that can relate, because the amount of detail is less of a barrier to entry and more of a reward for effort and experimentation. No matter how much we go over, remember that this can very well become one of your favorite games, even at its most basic level. Thanks to Poppi, the party is able to sneak their hefty luggage onto the Ardainian warship and reunite without a hitch. This is the first time battling with a full party of drivers, Rex being the attacker, Nia the healer, and Tora the tank by default. With the exception of poor old Tora, a driver can equip any type of blade they want, and depending on their setup, they'll be granted a few bonus power-ups. Tora included this time, make sure to invest in each driver's affinity charts. Unlike the blades, these ones function like a traditional skill tree. Another first is a heart-to-heart, a skit to soothe the player after the deafening mob of Ardainian Soldiers. Heart-to-hearts make for some of the best interactions in the game, to the point where it will likely become a priority for you to seek out. I'll be saving my favorites for spoiler territory, but this is already a good start in reinforcing how charming Poppi is. Awaiting us at the exits is Dougal, a corrupt imperial bureaucrat with a habit of flamboyant poses. He must realize he's a throwaway villain because he is milking his screen time. Since blades can self-regenerate, he uses his own as cover to delay his imminent defeat. I must say, the incompetence of the Empire sure made this rescue mission convenient, albeit suspiciously convenient, because the supposed execution was a mere ploy to fall right into Morag's hands. The Special Inquisitor does not want to hurt or use Pyra. In fact, she doesn't want her to be used at all. 500 years ago, the Aegis War concluded with devastating casualties, including 3 Titans and their inhabitants, all of whom fell victim to the Aegis's power. Pyra's expression confirms this tragedy, but Rex and the gang refuse to give her up. Although the player might have an easy time, our heroes are getting whooped. In a last-ditch effort, they bait Morag and Bridget to a nearby water tower, collapsing it onto them for a slim opportunity to escape. It may not be a conclusive victory, but I adore this climax. Forget the Aegis, Rex and Tora are rookie drivers. There's no way they should be winning fair and square against the Empire's strongest duo. And the manner in which they play dirty exhibits how magnificently they are depicted as a team rather than individuals with identical goals. Furthermore, it sets up a tremendous characterization of Morag. It says a lot that she is less offended by the colossal vandalism and the Aegis escaping than she is by being spared. She then chooses to let them go because of her own morbid curiosity, a peculiar contrast to her unyielding diligence. Once safe and sound, Nia and Dromark bid farewell to the others, urging Rex to give a final plea. He reaffirms his belief in Elysium, confident that it would end the fight for Titans by providing a home for everyone. After Tora eats dirt, Nia finds the prospect intriguing enough for them to stay. The chapter ends with a campfire scene that continues to warm my heart. The scenery is beautiful, the camaraderie is touching, and Rex's crush on Pyra is pleasantly awkward yet sweet. It may just be one night, but this sincere serenity is exactly what our heroes needed to prepare for the journey ahead. Now that we've established a foundation of Xenoblade 2, there are a few divisive aspects that warrant some context from its development cycle. The game was revealed in January 2017 before releasing at the end of the year in December. This turnaround time may not seem as shocking as Xenoblade 3, but 2 was blatantly nowhere near as polished upon its reveal. Not to mention, it was released a mere 2 years after Xenoblade X, thanks to the miracle work of a small team of 40 developers. The bulk of Monolith Soft were busy with Breath of the Wild, and as much as I love Xenoblade 2, it should have been delayed a few months. Did Nintendo really need a last-minute game in a year that was far beyond expectation? While the essential ingredients such as the narrative, world design, and combats were all completely nailed, there are clearly rougher edges that are remnants of the chaos. We've already gone over the tutorials and a few quality of life issues, but one of the largest sacrifices is the inconsistency in character design. Many of the designs were outsourced to other Japanese artists. Most notable is the Torna faction by Tetsuya Nomura of Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts fame. The variety of art styles primarily involve the blades, and though I like how it adds to their otherworldly nature, it isn't as cohesive as it could have been with more time. Like Xenoblade 3, the main protagonists were designed by Masasuku Saito, and I know that may be hard to believe. So let's stop ignoring the humongous elephants in the room. Xenoblade 2 does not shy away from sex appeal. Pyra and Bridget are the most prevalent offenders. There's a generous camera angle every now and then, and for some reason there's specifically 3 blades with comical jiggle physics. I would have to be foolish to not understand these criticisms, yet somehow they tend to be more exaggerated than the designs themselves. They may be distracting at first, but throughout the game, they don't feel out of place because over-the-top outfits are the norm in this world. I mean, look at Rex for goodness sake. But never mind that, because the main issue here, the root of this discourse, is the girl on the front cover not wearing any pants. Because naturally, female characters tend to attract the most vocal opinions, especially from men. And I'm tired of men dismissing the woman in this game and in real life for showing more skin or having larger proportions than usual. The irony is, they'll act like they know better when they're the ones treating them like objects. I'm not saying I know better either, but I would like to share an observation. I will never forget the reaction to Bayonetta 3's proper reveal. It reminded me that, on paper, everything about Bayonetta exists for straight men, but in practice, her most passionate fans are the opposite. Aside from being a badass, they admire how confident she is in her sexuality and how comfortable she is in her own skin. By that same token, some of the biggest Xenoblade 2 fans I know are women and or members of the LGBT community. And that's because, regardless of how you feel about Pyra's appearance, they look up to her as a strong female character, simply because she is a strongly written character. Now of course, there will be those who just can't get past the designs. That's totally valid. Sexualization is unavoidably divisive. My point is, this is a superficial issue in more ways than one, and when it comes to female representation, I'd rather put stock into the experience of a woman than some random greasy dude on Twitter. As a random greasy dude on YouTube, Xenoblade 2 has my favorite main cast in a JRPG, and that's because of the number of female leads who are all genuinely strong, entertaining, and pivotal to the story. Stick around and I'll prove just that. The presentation does have an undisputable flaw, however, the English dub. The actors are talented, but they were held back by time constraints and a clunky voice direction. I hate to single this actor out because I do like him most of the time, but there's no getting around it. This is the polar opposite of Adam Howden's iconic performance with Shulk.
I'll kill you!
Okay, I get it. I'm a terrible disappointment.
To be honest, in spite of its flaws, I was never that bothered by the dub, as its lows tend to be endearingly cheesy. What does bother me is that Rex gets a lot of undeserved flack when in actuality he is a good character. He's just overshadowed by the burdens of a goofy outfit and a lackluster performance. Needless to say, he comes off much better with subs. This is where it gets complicated though, because I vastly prefer every other character in the dub. Their voices complement their personalities so well that I tried to play with subs recently, but I could not make it all the way through. While the dub may have lower lows, it has way higher highs. Thus far, Nia, Morag, and Malos are the standout examples. All of them are effortlessly charismatic thanks in part to the dub. And don't worry, when we get deep into spoilers, I'll make sure to give Sky Bennett her much-deserved love. To clarify, I am by no means suggesting that the dub is superior. The story is too well written for me to be biased here, so if the lows are distracting, don't bother putting up with them. With that, I think it's about time to move on to the chapter where everything starts to come together. In order to reach the World Tree, our party is going to need a ship of our own. Fortunately, Tora's nearby uncle is willing to let us borrow one at the cost of a few chores. This is how the player gains access to changing the Cloud Tide, a mechanic that is regrettably underused. Areas that diverge based on the tide is a novel idea that adds realism, but because the instances are few and far between, it almost becomes an afterthought. Nonetheless, we successfully borrow Uncle Pon's boat and subsequently realize that he's not getting it back. A gigantic serpent known as Ophion sends our hero spiraling into another titan, Uraya. Though he may have avoided digestion, trouble insists on following. Rex ends up learning that he has a long way to go before becoming a skilled driver, and luckily, he's allowed some time. This is Vandam, leader of mercenaries and caretaker of war orphans at Garfont's village. After treating us to a meal over a dreary talk about war, Vandam drags us along on a Merc mission. This means we get to play as Vandam and Rock, and Vandam and Rock are cool. Heck, Vandam is so cool, he's willing to teach Rex one of the best arts in the game, Anchor Shot. Well, Rex already had Anchor Shot, but it is now able to contribute to a crucial battle mechanic. Driver combos. Driver combos are much more straightforward than blade combos. All you need in your party are arts with the side effects of break, topple, launch, and smash. By inflicting these effects in order within their varying time limits, the enemy will be stunned and eventually receive massive damage while dropping generous rewards. It's time to confront our targets, a threatening evil that needs to be vanquished not only for the good of the village, but for the entire sake of humanity. A giant spider who somehow resonated with a blade? Poor Tora. Spider or not, a blade will return to its core crystal the moment its driver passes away. As long as the crystal remains intact, the blade will continue to exist and inevitably resonate with another driver. The caveat is, the blade will lose their memories every time they return to the crystal. It will essentially undergo a cycle of new existences, all without its knowledge or consent.
But memories can be painful as well. They can be a terrible burden. It's just as well. Eternity is a long time to collect bad memories.
Pyra.
I'm sorry. I was just thinking, sometimes being able to forget is a blessing.
This bittersweet cycle is emblematic of why blades are one of my favorite concepts in any narrative. Much like how they are woven into each and every aspect of gameplay, we will soon discover how Monolith Soft was committed to thoroughly depicting the repercussions of their existence. Back at Garfon's, Van Damme notices the similarities in Rex and Pyra's thighs, their wounds. Due to their shared life force, whenever one of them feels physical pain, the other will too. Man, it'd be a shame if a villain exploited that. Oh hey, a villain to exploit that. Akos is a member of Torna and the pettiest smartass in the game. His blade, Abrona, can manipulate the ether in the air so that they are nearly untouchable. It's a marvelous ability that would be unrivaled if it wasn't for chain attacks. The party gauge, in short, is filled up by playing well. 1 segment can be used to revive a party member, while depleting all 3 will allow our drivers to take turns wailing away on the opponents. To extend the duration of a chain attack, the player can add a single orb of each element by completing a blade combo. Not only will the party members attack the enemy, they will also attack an elemental orb. An orb can withstand 3 hits, and normally your target will be random. However, choose an orb's weakness and it is assured to be targeted by an attack counting as 2. And to cap it off, by shattering an orb, the party will be treated to another round of delightful mayhem. The longer it lasts, the higher the damage, and if the opponent taps out, the higher amount of EXP and rewards. It's tricky to learn and therefore has the poorest tutorial, but once you've gotten it down, chain attacks are exceptionally satisfying. There is unlimited adrenaline to be felt by destroying each orb, and yet it is somehow equivalent to the endorphins instilled by seeing how high the numbers can reach. There's even a special ultimate attack called a full burst that requires a total of 5 orbs, 4 if you shatter them fast enough. It's so difficult that you'll probably only see it in the endgame, if at all, but pulling it off is the pinnacle of excitement. The tutorial may have given us a freebie, but Akko still makes his mark. He severely injures Pyra before he retreats, leaving her unconscious. Feeling guilty, Nia wants to confess to Van Damme about her past affiliation with Torna, but before she can get the words out, he reassures her. He despises Torna for all the drivers they've slaughtered in the name of core crystals, but Nia isn't with them anymore. What matters to him is that she became who she is today. If it wasn't clear by now, Van Damme makes a remarkable impression in such a brief amount of time. He understands the bleakness of reality, and rather than using that knowledge to discourage our ambitious goals, he uses it to better us and motivate us. Most of all, he wants Rex to understand that as much as he hates war and believes himself to be different, there will always be strife, and he has no choice but to accept he is fighting his own war.
But war ain't about right and wrong. Power. That's all it is. And power can take many different forms. It depends on the heart of its wielder. If we don't use our power, just because we're scared of it, we're done for. As for who's right and who's wrong, no one knows for sure. So all we can do is protect what's important.
I think I understand.
We all got our own war, kid.
My... war?
Once Pyra recovers, Van Damme suggests heading to the Urayan capital in order to find a way past Ophion. But before we leave Garfont, there's something rather important to do first.
Cutie cutie, lovely lovely, blushy crushy, tee-hee.
Pyra, please do not tell me you're gonna...
Cutie, lovely, blushy, crushy, tee-hee?
This cringe is notorious. It's basically showing how innocent Pyra is to go along with Tora's immature idea of cute. This heart-to-heart is the antithesis of the rest, but that's not why I bring it up. Strangely enough, I've seen players react as if this isn't supposed to be cringe. It's awfully clear that the audience is meant to empathize with Nia here. That doesn't make it any less painful, I just wanted to prove that the writing is very self-aware. Was this particular example necessary for that? No, I was trolling, because there's a much better case in the form of Zeke and Pandoria. Apologies, what I meant to say was Zeke von Gambu, the bringer of chaos, the Zekinator, and the courageous wielder of the purple lightning Dream Smasher. I always found the humor in this game to be charming, but Zeke and Pandoria absolutely take the cake. They are hilarious parodies of anime and JRPG tropes. Oh, forgive me for being mistaken yet again, for this is a trio to admire, not a mere duo.
Oh. Hello, little guy. How are you? What are you doing out here all alone?
Turtles! Handling a man's turtle.
Yeah, if these three don't light up your day, you might as well just stop watching the video. Zeke desires the Aegis as usual, and after a cataclysmic taste of the purple lightning Dream Smasher, our plot armor miraculously kicks in when a fragile boulder saves the day. And thank goodness, for we are now safe to explore the most beautiful area in Uraya, arguably in the entire game. Uraya as a whole is a sight to behold. I knew being eaten by a whale would be breathtaking, but not quite like this. Unfortunately, this is also the last place you'll see if you are heeding the spoiler warning. But before you go, there are two pressing matters about the combat that I need to address. With all of the main battle mechanics assembled, there's no use holding back. Number 1, the battle system is slow. This critique is frustratingly cliché, but there is a bit of truth to it. The battle system can indeed be slow when you're inefficient. Don't take that personally, because evidently, the player isn't given much guidance on how to be efficient. Unique monsters and larger enemies will naturally take longer, but when it comes to each story boss up to this point, I beat all of them in less than 5 minutes. Zeke was only 2. That wasn't because I was optimized, that is simply the norm once the combat starts to click. So how do we be efficient? Well, there's 3 easy steps. A. Use pouch items. B. Just like auto attacks, most actions can be cancelled into another. In fact, the game rewards you for doing so. For example, performing an art right as an attack lands will quicken the charge of specials. You'll know you timed it correctly if a blue indicator appears. C stands for the combo we haven't discussed yet. Fusion combos. And not to take shortcuts, but I sincerely believe I cannot top this excerpt from a previous video. Before I do that though, let's briefly recap the other types of combos. Blade combos involve your blade's special attacks and the combo tree. By following the tree, the combo will advance with the appropriate level of special attack as well as the appropriate elements. Driver combos involve your driver's arts and should be familiar to any Xenoblade fan. Some arts will have effects such as break, topple, launch, and smash. Inflicting them in this order will not only stun the opponents, but may spawn valuable items and HP. Once you grasp these two concepts, you're all set, because a fusion combo refers to them happening at the same time. Recall that a driver combo has 4 stages, while a blade combo has 3. Well, the efficiency of a fusion combo is based on the total amount of stages. So, if we were to complete a blade combo on a toppled enemy, that would be a total of 5 stages. Doing so would result in massive bonuses, such as an additional 75% damage and, if that was the finishing blow, 70% EXP. But here's the kicker. You'll still be dealing an extra 50% at a mere 2 stages, which should be a regular occurrence. Thanks, past Nara, you saved me some time. Once you incorporate it into your strategy, I guarantee the combat will be faster and much more interesting altogether. Now, I realize that from an outsider's glance, this all seems overly complicated. It seems like there's too much to learn and too much to keep up with. And sure, detailed mechanics are not for everyone. I'm usually not the type myself. So what separates Xenoblade 2? Why do I love this battle system? Contemporary Nara? I'm glad you asked. First, I have to reiterate, the prep work is already compelling because of how much incentive there is to experiment. There's the gacha system, the limited overdrives, the differences in how each driver handles the same weapon type, the mere existence of the combo tree, the reduced damage when spamming the same blade combo, and the fact that a longer chain attack requires a variety of elements. Simply put, there are enough restrictions set in place to provoke critical thinking and applaud strategy without rejecting a straightforward playstyle. Now for combat itself, no matter your first impression, there is only going up. The combat is constantly evolving, becoming a magnificent spectacle that reflects how much stronger everyone has grown, and by that I don't just mean your party members, I mean you as a player. Most JRPGs can feel like a game of higher stats and stronger moves, but here it will feel like you're improving at a skill, and that improvement is as tangible as it is meaningful. Not only do the prizes deepen, but the speed and damage output also become riveting. I cannot understate how fast the chaos becomes once you are able to orchestrate it. There are so many moving parts that may appear superfluous, but seeing them come together is poetry in motion. It all feels natural, nothing feels out of place as if it was never complex to begin with. The mechanics flow seamlessly, creating this beautiful loop where each and every turn has a balance of risk and reward. Let's face it, everyone has lost a battle because they prematurely chain attacked, or they waited too long because they wanted to maximize the overkill bonus. And everyone has clutched the battle by ignoring a health potion because the combo just needed to hit. This is my last chance at all costs, I need this combo to hit. There's always stakes, everything matters, the only wasted action is if you mess up. I hope I was able to sell you on it because I must now provide a spoiler warning. If there is any chance you will play this game for the first time, I advise you to stop watching. And if you do end up enjoying it and are wondering, I highly recommend the DLC because it just makes everything better except for the DLC blades who are stupidly OP. Make sure to press redeem all to avoid spoilers. As for those sticking around, boy do we have a lot to cover. This side of Uraya needs a detour through some nasty creatures. This is likely the first area that's tough to navigate for the player. There isn't much breathing room for escape to be a reliable option. Fonza Maima isn't exactly a hero's welcome either. We're met with war preparations against Mor Ardain, coupled with an asshole driver taking rations from a little girl. After lecturing the violent driver, Van Damme recognizes the little girl as his former comrade's granddaughter, Iona. Before meeting her grandpa, the group stops by at a theater for a dramatization of the Aegis War. 500 years ago, a knight named Adam awoke the Aegis' power to save the world from darkness. Though this came at the cost of 3 continents, Adam swore to pass on her legacy. This scene captures how endearing low-budget theater can be. What a fun way to learn about the past. Even Pyra got a kick out of it, but as Rex, Nia, and Common Sense indicates, it must have been an awkward viewing. And wouldn't you know it, the playwright happens to be Van Damme's aforementioned acquaintance, Cole. The years are starting to debilitate him, but he did retain the knowledge on how to reach the World Tree. We decide to give Cole some time to rest up, but not before Pyra catches up with him, referring to him as Minoth. While our heroes stay at the inn, Minoth is visited by none other than Malos and Akos. In exchange for Pyra's location, they offer to manipulate the ether to save Minoth's life. When he refuses to budge, they instead opt to lure Pyra away by exploiting Iona. Pyra struggles to defeat Malos alone, but fortunately Minoth alerts the others to make the timely save. And thus ensues one of the most brutal boss fights in the game. Despite only needing to deplete half of one of their HP bars, this battle is a gatekeeper. It will be the first to humiliate you for not grasping the mechanics. First, it's typical to focus on the lower level enemy, but Malos will frequently taunt the party so they are forced to deal with him. Secondly, Shackle Blade and Shackle Driver. These are status effects that reduce affinity and prevent blades or drivers from taking action. In short, you are fucked. These will be the longest few seconds of your life. As punishing as this is, I'm actually grateful. Now that players have full access to the battle mechanics, there needs to be a boss that pushes them to connect the dots. Of course, it is possible to overlevel or brute force till you get lucky, but regardless, you will remember this ass beating. Abrona cuts off the flow of ether to the blades, extremely weakening them. Akos declares Jin's goal to annihilate humankind, asserting the war as evidence of their futility. He reminds Nia that her past is also proof, leaving her helpless in remembrance. Malos argues with Pyra over the Architect's intent, equating their existence as his instruments of destruction. He then powers up, leading to a beating befitting the player's experience. Tora and Poppi, Nia and Dromar, Rex and Pyra. The whole party is incapable of defending themselves, except for Vandam and Rock. In an act of defiance, Vandam uses his own body as an ether source. The rush of adrenaline gives him the strength he needs to fend off Malos and Akos, while desperately begging Rex to escape.
Vandam!
Move it! Take Pyra and scram, kid!
I can't just leave you here.
Ah! Rex, don't go dying on me here. You gotta make it. You gotta get away from here now. Live for her. You gotta make it to Elysium. I won't allow it. Give it up. Just go, Rex! Remember to fight your war!
Malos strikes the final blow to Vandam, sending Rock back to his core crystal. Rex gains a second wind in fury, choosing to attempt revenge over retreat. But alas, they are still too powerful for him.
So long, kid!
Rex!
What?
Mithra has awoken. She engulfs the platform with beams of light, crumbling half of it into the cloud sea. Akos uncharacteristically panics, while Malos gladly welcomes her return. Mithra quickly humbles him by activating Foresight, a prediction of the near future that allows Rex to evade their attacks with ease. Let's take a moment to process everything that happened. Holy crap, what an outstanding sequence of events. I know it's hard to appreciate because Mithra is an open secret nowadays, but the foreshadowing was impeccable. There is a plethora of dialogue and details that subtly allude to Pyra's other half. Why wasn't Pyra weakened by water like Brigid? Because her true elements is light. Why did Malos, Gramps, and Minoth need the Emerald to recognize her? Because they originally knew her as Mithra. Why was the wig blonde at the theater? Because the Aegis was and is blonde. This is my personal favorite because most players will just assume the prop is inaccurate. And all of that brilliant writing culminates in a flawless introduction. The unlikely MVP here is Akos. His reactions perfectly illustrate the gravity of the situation. When it was looking grim for the party, he was being his usual smug self, trading amusing one-liners with Malos. The bastard even had the gall to cry cliché while pushing up his glasses. But as soon as Mithra appears, Akos is shook. His demeanor turns into an unfamiliar fear, shaking him into admitting that he doesn't think they're going to win. In a rematch with the villains, the player is treated to a satisfying reversal of fortune, but this victory is no cause for celebration. Though Mithra shatters their blade's core crystals, Malos and Akos are able to make a run for it, and the only thing left in sight is Vandam's corpse. Pyra returns into the arms of Nia, who regrets her previous inaction. All she can do now is watch Rex mourn his fallen mentor, a man who accepted her for who she was and will forever help them become who they needed to be. True to a mercenary, Vandam is buried where he fell. Rex tries to temper Iona's guilt, but when Pyra arrives, the attention diverts to her transformation. Mythra takes over before Pyra can respond, and enraged by her awakening, chastises Rex for not listening to Vandam. Rex owns up to his mistake, yet stands firm on not leaving her behind. Having enough, Mythra leaves any and all questions up to Pyra. 500 years ago, a man climbed up the world tree in search of the Architect. What he found in his place were two core crystals known as Aegises, Mythra and Malos. The man chose to resonate with Malos, resulting in an uncontrollable chaos. Mythra, on the other hand, resonated with Adam, leading to the aptly named Aegis War and the death of 3 Titans. To prevent her power from being abused, Mythra took the form of Pyra and was sealed away by Adam underneath the Cloud Sea. Rex takes no offense to Pyra's secrecy and consoles her about her existence.
Power depends on the heart of its wielder. That's what Vandam said. That's why your power is the power to protect. The power to keep everyone safe and smiling.
He then follows up that poetic line with the polar opposites.
Make a girl cry? That's not gonna fly. Make a girl smile? You pass the trial.
Rex occasionally cites a bunch of ethical guidelines, and this has to be my favorite because of how unapologetically corny it is. Too bad Gramps breaks the code immediately by reminding her of Adam. But Pyra isn't the only one with a secret. Surprise, Minoth is a blade who is vulnerable to age due to being a flesh eater. A flesh eater is a blade whose cells have been fused with a human's. Before the Aegis War, they were the product of experiments aiming for a more powerful life form, and when that isn't achieved, you end up with a case like Minoth. He then requests a delivery to his driver, who knows how to reach Elysium. Rex agrees and asks for a favor of his own. He wants Minoth to write a play about Vandam, so his legacy will inspire others. In the meantime, that legacy will be carried on by Rex himself as he begins leading the Garfon's mercenaries. Up to 6 blades can engage in a Merc mission as long as they meet the prerequisites. More squads can be dispatched once we've completed enough missions and returned to Garfon's, where the blades can be spotted around camp. And that's pretty much it. Merc missions are entirely passive. The wait can be excruciating for a few specific goals, but otherwise it's a convenient method of accruing rewards and improving blades. This is where commons excel in particular, because their charts will fill out with ease. So much like pouch items, Merc missions are extensively helpful unless the player is too lazy. In which case, they'll have plenty of time to slack off as they enter the worst hour of Xenoblade 2. Minoth's driver lies in Indal, a trip entailing Argentum and Mor Ardain. At the Argentum Inn, we are greeted by standard anime filler, where Mythra sleepwalks into the boys' room. This scene encapsulates the next hour in that it's not bad, it's just unnecessary. I will say, I am amused by Dromark not having any of Gramps' banter, and can we take a moment to appreciate his sleeping cap? Before we can take off, a meddling kid robs us of Rock's core crystal, and long story short...
You've wasted a lot of our time, you know.
This debacle could have been a great side quest, but instead it feels out of place in the main story. The only part that's noteworthy is Rock's awakening, the first glimpse at a blade losing their memories, and an event that could have taken place at Mor Ardain. Since we're already sidetracked, we may as well pick up an Easter egg in Argentum, Massive Melee Mythra. After Mythra was censored as a spirit in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Monolith Soft was nice enough to patch that outfit into Xenoblade 2, and I would be remiss not to gush about my girls making the cuts. Their character models are gorgeous, and it's hard to cry censorship when they're arguably hotter. Mythra's tights blend in wonderfully with her color scheme, and the lower half of Pyra's outfit makes sense now. Unfortunately, we'll have to call her Party Pooper Pyra, because her outfit was not patched in. Funnily enough, Mythra's Smash design was the final content update to Xenoblade 2. Pyra's wasn't possible because her spirit wasn't censored for some reason. Speaking of updates, remember when the Ardainian Soldiers were patched?
You're done. Think you can take me?
Thank you for not forgetting. Moveset-wise, I was hoping for the blade combos to be represented, but they are a stellar choice for a stance-changing fighter. Technically, Mythra should be superior in every way, but in Xenoblade 2's battle system, Mythra improves accuracy, evasion, and critical hit rate, while Pyra solely increases damage. This is well realized in Smash with their contrast in speed and raw strength, and just like Xenoblade 2, Mythra's pros are more valuable in the long run. Pyra does have the advantage of being 6 units heavier, and I do mean advantage, Pyra, you deserve to be proud! Together, they are currently considered a top-tier character in Ultimate, if not the best, which I think is hilarious, because incidentally, my most wanted fighter in Smash 4 was Bayonetta. It may be jarring not to use Mythra's most well-known design, but I'll be sticking with the original, if only to prove a little skin won't undermine an engrossing story. Let's get back on track to an iconic track in Mor Ardain. Although it is home to the Empire, its near desolation is what motivated the conquest of Gormott. In the capital, Albacavanish, Tora runs into a totally interesting and memorable family friend, Mui Mui. He hooks us up with a discount at an inn with a famous hot spring, and you know what that means! The girls are having fun for fan service, the boys are about to intrude whether they meant to or not, and it'll be a classic laugh about respecting boundaries. Except there's barely fan service, there are no boys, and it's unironically one of the most clever cases of foreshadowing I have ever witnessed in my life. Mythra notices something off about Nia and promises to keep it to themselves. What she is referring to is ambiguous because of the hot spring. Without this setting and context, this conversation would not be possible to begin with. The writers have the audience in the palm of their hands. Everyone is going into this expecting the cliché anime affair, making it considerably more effective when those expectations are not only subverted, but also used against them. A ruckus interrupts the relaxing night, and our heroes cannot help but investigate. They come to find the Ardainian Soldiers unable to arrest an artificial blade, who Tora recognizes as Lila. Lila was worked on by Tora, Datapon, and Grampypon until one day they were attacked by a totally interesting and memorable Napon. After Grampypon's murder, Datapon urged Tora to escape with the tools he would use to create Poppi. With Lila being functional, Tora deduces that the culprits must have kept Datapon alive to finish the project. Now, if only the Empire was as perceptive, because in the same vein as Sonic and Shadow, they somehow mistake Poppi for Lila. To be fair, Morag takes issue with the Aegis changing forms, so it seems as if a rematch was imminent. Once our innocence is apparent, Morag agrees to work together in order to locate the perpetrators. Their base of operations ends up being an abandoned factory, a mystery we practically solve ourselves by using Tora's knowledge of artificial blades. There are 2 steps in this process that will likely be cumbersome, the first being these green barrels. Their origins can be deciphered by using either a level 3 field skill or undergoing a 30-minute Merc mission. 30 minutes is a little much when the average player will have to resort to it. Luckily, Merc Missions are completely optional from here on out. The second obstacle is the lock on the gates leading to the factory. The key can be found in a secret area, but as its term implies, it isn't the intended solution. From what I've seen, this is the most common place where players get stuck, and personally speaking, this was the only time I had to use a walkthrough, and I promptly felt stupid. By observing our surroundings, we can see that there is a cliff directly above the locked pathway. That cliff is where we found the green barrels, conveniently in front of the stairs we need to descend. I emphasize because there are several areas where the obvious path forward is blocked off, yet a brief observation will uncover a nearby detour. Yes, the navigation system should have been better, but I never found myself frustrated as the answer was never cryptic or unfair. Those hooligans sure chose a good hiding spot. There is a legion of high-leveled creatures lying in wait, the most powerful being Zeke von Gembu, the bringer of chaos, the Zekinator, the courageous wielder of the purple lightning Dream Smasher, and now revealed to be the unwavering beholder of the Eye of Shining Justice. Unlike the last encounter, Pandoria gets a chance to shine, albeit at the expense of her own driver. No worries, Zeke isn't alone in his humiliation, for we are about to bear witness to the greatest battle transition in JRPG history.
Were you so frightened by our power that you wet yourself, furry ears?
Did I what? You've got a lot of nerve, you one-eyed monster.
Nia, you do know one-eyed monster usually means...
Huh? Means what?
It's, Mithra, why are you blushing?
Shut up!
Dick! It means dick! How did I not know this? How does everyone else know? I mean, it makes sense now that I think about it, and if everyone already knows, then how did I live this long without knowing it meant dick? Having to record that line late at night when I don't live alone is really awkward. And you know what's the best part? The localizers. No matter the language, they had to find a euphemism for penis that is also a double entendre for Zeke. The Japanese equivalent is Kame Atama, or Turtlehead, referring to Zeke's infatuation with turtles. Sorry, weebs, the English localization reigns supreme. One-Eyed Monster is more relevant to the topic of the cutscene, and the nickname Shellhead is basically another way of saying Turtlehead. So we got twice the number of dick jokes. Eat that, Japan! As Team Rocket's blasting off again, our heroes infiltrate the factory and successfully reunites with Datapon. In an inconceivable twist, it turns out Mui Mui was the assailant the whole time! He has been in cahoots with the equally deceptive Banna, mass-producing artificial blades for profit. Banna orders Lila to dispose of us, making this our second fight with her. The first confrontation didn't really need to exist, and it's a shame because now this one feels less special. At least this time we get a proper clash between Poppi and Lila, but before Poppi can finish the job, she withdraws to Datapon's plea. Lila is the sole reminder of Grampypon left, and after breaking free from Banna's control, she returns to her family's arms. Giving the family some time to themselves, Rex and Nia pursue without Tora. The lack of a third party member and a dedicated tank can be challenging. You could engage a tank blade or two, or you could rely on Mithra to maximize DPS and pray. There is not the slightest bit of sarcasm when I say your worst nightmare will be this Bunnet. It can topple you instantly, so get rid of this thing as fast as possible. Once we've caught up with the Batapons, they finally unveil the ace up their sleeve. Lila, but bigger. This is Rosa, a boss that elicits what we're all thinking here.
Oh, this is too ridiculous for words! Come on!
Leave it to Lila to not go down swinging. By supplying her energy, Poppi is able to channel an all-new transformation. Poppi QT Mode. A few panty shots later, and Rosa is toast. Mui Mui gets knocked out while Banna slips away. We corner him at Bulge Harbor and threaten to... Why is it called Bulge Harbor? And threaten to hand him over to the Empire if the mass production doesn't cease. He reluctantly agrees, much to the chagrin of Torna. That's right, did you think this was all filler? To my surprise, Akos even mentioned this back in Chapter 3. Meet Patroka, Akos' sister, and Mikhail, a dork. They may not get along, but they do complement each other in battle extraordinarily well. It's an evenly matched brawl until Morag and Brigid make their fashionably late arrival. With the Empire's strongest blade and driver officially on our team, we get ruthlessly slaughtered. This is a genuinely difficult fight, so switching to the evasive tank that isn't that evasive yet almost guarantees a death. It's worth it though, she can catch up immediately, so this light hiccup doesn't make this occasion any less hype. Thanks to our combined forces, Mithra lines up the perfect shot to shatter their blade's core crystals. Patroka seemingly powers up in retaliation, but her efforts are suppressed by a mysterious bystander. Mikhail forces Patroka to retreat, while our heroes are greeted by Fan Lenorn, goddess of the Indoline Praetorium. And if that wasn't enough of a premonition, the chapter ends with Jin visiting a body encased in ice, a woman he refers to as Laura. Chapter 4 is generally agreed to be the weakest for being a tonal shift from 3, and although I can relate, I need to give Tora his due. Sure, the whole maid thing is silly, but it wouldn't be a Naupon without some semblance of nonsense. What isn't traditional of a Naupon is a gloomy backstory with further implications on the narrative. Don't take these lighthearted moments for granted. As the ominous cliffhanger suggests, we are about to enter the roller coaster that is the rest of the game. During the Aegis War, Adam and Mithra were accompanied by Laura and Hayes, a driver and blade who share a striking resemblance. Hayes has the incredible ability to restrain a blade's capabilities, and although it can counter foresight, Adam believed Mithra had yet to unlock her true strength. Their adventure would be joined by several others as well, including Bridget, a young child, and none other than Jin. Back to the present, the group is now on their way to Indal after a personal invite from the Praetor, who happens to be Minot's and Malos's driver. Rex accepts since he was looking for him anyway, while Mithra is more concerned about Hayes' new life as fan. Morag and Bridget will also be sticking around to make sure there's no funny business. Indal lies beyond a mountain of clouds, so we opt to travel through via the Leftharian archipelago. Letheria might just be my favorite area in the game. It may not be as bountiful in activities, but the color palette, the cloud sea, and the music all coalesce into an enchanting aesthetic. In spite of its terrifying monsters, it still manages to create an atmosphere that is peaceful and affectionate, almost like we're coming back home. And thus it is only fitting to learn that Rex did indeed grow up in Letharia's Fonset village, the coziest settlement in Alrest. Before staying the night with Aunt Corinne, Rex visits his parents' graves to introduce Pyra and their ambition for Elysium. Corinne later explains to Pyra that due to some disaster in his original home, Rex's family washed up onto Leftharian shores when he was 2 years old. His parents were barely able to deliver him to Fonset before succumbing to their wounds. The details aren't precise, but they do feed into his distaste for war and his longing for a permanent home for everyone. Upon learning this, Pyra regrets being with Rex as she feels suffering and grief accompany her. Bridget passes by just in time to hear Pyra laments that the world would be better off without her. That was certainly a downer, but things pick up in the morning when Zeke von Gembu, the bringer of chaos, the Zekinator, the courageous wielder of the purple lightning dream smasher, and the unwavering beholder of the eye of shining justice, is ultimately revealed to be the crown prince of Tantal.
It is quite the rare opportunity to see his swordsmanship firsthand.
Now this is more like it. Ooh, come on, yeah. Keep it coming.
Victory earns us a passage into the Praetorium because he's actually not a running gag after all. Okay, well he is, but he was trying to test us for Indal's sake. He didn't steal Pyra because he never intended to steal her, and unlike Morag, he didn't question Mithra's appearance because he already had that intel. Together, we finally enter Indal in all of its glory. The Praetorium is in charge of regulating core crystals, meaning that the average person is not allowed to resonate with a blade without their permission. If that influence sounds way too controlling, abusive, and unreasonable, welcome to real life! And there are numerous refugees who take that stance further, protesting against blades since they are routinely used for war. As the party rests for the big day tomorrow, Rex inquires about Adam. Pyra reminisces on how kind and inspiring he was, comparing him to the likes of her current driver. Though Rex is flattered by her praise, he can sense a bit of sadness in her recollection. Another bout of melancholy is found in Hayes the following morning. An ancient mural reminds her of the countless memories she must have lost, so Rex offers to ask Mithra about her past. On the flip side, Bridget shows Pyra a diary she has kept throughout her many lives. This is a common method of preserving a blade's memories, but not everyone is privileged enough to have theirs passed down by the Empire. Recalling her words at Fonset, Bridget urges Pyra to open up about her feelings to Rex. It soon reaches time for us to meet with the Praetor, the same man who climbed the World Tree in the first place, Amalthus. On account of his past, he agrees to help us reach Elysium and requests to speak with Pyra in private. He ends up receiving Mithra instead, who is having absolutely none of his BS.
I often wonder if we are growing as a people, or in fact, regressing.
Amalthus is sus, and I have no qualms pointing it out because the audience is supposed to think that. Even Rex gets a bad vibe that is analogous to Malos. And it's for this reason I am perplexed when others criticize Amalthus as predictable, as if it was ever a secret. Once again, the writers are using a trope to their advantage, this case being the corrupt church. They know the player will be skeptical, so rather than invoking a futile twist, the suspense comes from the specifics. For instance, Mithra interrogates Amalthus with questions the audience is dying to ask. He owes his lack of aging to the lifespan of an Indoline, and he decided to help Rex because he wants Alrest to be saved. None of these responses are lies, but they do possess a hint of deception. And that's the intrigue of Amalthus. It's about finding out exactly how he fits into the whole picture. Moving on, Jin infiltrates Temperantia, a titan that was demolished by the Aegis War and now serves as a demilitarized zone. The Ardainians were excavating weaponized titans that are relics of an ancient nation, and Jin knows all too well that a weapon is made to be used. He then wipes out the Urayan forces in the guise of Mor Ardain. Upon learning of the attack, the party deduces that Torna is behind things and agrees to investigate with Hayes' assistance. Zeke and Pandoria also come along at the sound of Torna, which means the party is set in stone. Zeke is an attacker with extravagant animations, and while Rex may have the Aegis, he has the honor of an awesome New Game Plus exclusive skill with the Eye of Shining Justice. He essentially becomes a Super Saiyan, except he is comically knocked down whenever the effect subsides. In Temperantia, we plan to stop Jin's havoc by cutting off the power to the Titan. We're able to make a safe landing thanks to Hayes, only to be met with a colossal defense mechanism. This has the potential to be one of the hardest bosses, due to it being a glass cannon. The mechanism has unlimited HP, so we have to sever its power lines. During their second phase, they will unleash an accelerated amount of spike damage. Xenoblade 1 fans may remember the term spike damage, but feel free not to, because it was traumatizing. A glass cannon is inherently fragile, so the trick is to blade combo as fast as possible and finish it off with a chain attack. At last, our heroes come face to face with Jin, who has scathing words for his former comrades. He takes off his mask to reveal a blood-esque core crystal, ensuing perhaps the most challenging fight so far. The previous might have been more obnoxious, but Jin has no gimmicks about him. He is pure, unadulterated carnage. Jin is somewhat limited by Hayes' ability, so he does not hesitate to murder her. Second thoughts start to haunt him though, for she is a spitting image of Laura. He then proceeds to deliver a passionate speech that I would be disrespectful to summarize myself.
Blades are granted phenomenal power from our creator on high, yet we are doomed to never remember. Why?
What?
The accumulation of memories is what allows mankind, no, all life to grow, change, evolve, but blades are fleeting. When we return to our cores, our memories are lost, our growth snatched away forever.
People aren't so different.
Man's life too has an end, yes. However, though each individual life is fleeting, you pass on your memories, allowing you to grow as a species, as a culture. Why does Indal control all the core crystals? By controlling the moment of every blade's birth, they enslave our entire kind. How is that fair? We have no culture because Indal decrees it. Because that's what your kind do.
Jin!
Why are you the masters and we the slaves? It is we who embody the very nature of this world.
With Hayes disposed of, Jin tries to unleash his full power, but succumbs to his own injuries. Akos hastily rescues him and leaves us to a rematch with a defense mechanism. Have no fear, this time it luckily functions like your average boss. Afterwards, Rex mourns Hayes' death, blaming himself for being helpless. The sympathy isn't shared by Mor Ardain and Uraya, whose armies close in with the intention of war. But before the battle can begin, it is interrupted by the Indoline Titan. Decades before the Aegis War, Jin was accidentally awoken by a 10-year-old Laura. His core crystal was initially stolen by a thief who attempts to kill her to return him to the core. Jin swiftly retaliates, swearing to protect Laura as her blade. A recuperating Jin then awakens to a similar pledge from Malos. In an uncharacteristic reflection, Malos is uncertain about whether or not they are truly being themselves, a concern that Jin compares to the likes of a human. At Indal, a summit is taking place between each nation in the midst of a ceasefire. The main opposition, of course, is between the Urayan queen, Rakura, and the youthful Ardainian emperor, Nile. Though they are legally cousins, Nile and Morag practically grew up as siblings, and he continues to refer to her as such. Rakura, on the other hand, sucks. There is nothing notable about her. Her existence is obligatory, and her screen time is worthless. Invited as neutral parties are Mithra and our boy Ozekliris Brunev Tantal. I love that Morag can't help but be amused by Zeke being taken seriously. With Zeke to back her up, Mithra informs the nations of Torna's involvement and their aim to restore Malos' full power at Elysium. Meanwhile, outside, Akos reaffirms Patroka and Mikhail that Elysium will serve a grander purpose, for there they will kill the Architect. After the summits, a funeral is held for the fallen goddess of the Praetorium. Mithra and Nia speculate as to why Haze did not return to her core crystal. Since Haze isn't a flesh eater, Mithra is confident that the unnatural shape of her crystal must be the answer. The gang later walks in on Amalthus cleansing core crystals, a process that makes resonance more likely to occur. He then sends Rex as an envoy to Tantal, who is currently in control of Ophion. See, Ophion is an artifice, one of many powerful machines at an Aegis's disposal. The most familiar should be Siren, the source of Mithra's beams of light. After the Aegis War, Tantal was able to subdue Ophion by means of an artifact known as the Omega Fetter. Though our sights are set for Tantal, things get complicated with a supposed assassination plot by Banna. We must have left our investigation skills in Mor Ardain, because we end up knocking out a poor innocent catering team. Fortunately, we course correct in time to put down Rosa for good, yet refusing to be captured, Banna instead opts for an explosion. Nile orders his blade Aegeon to protect the others while he tries to stop Banna, but alas, it is to no avail. No trace of Banna remains, and Aegeon's last words are of regret for not saving the Emperor. As Morag grieves, Nia convinces Dromark to distract everyone while she tends to Nile alone.
You are...
Shh. You're gonna be fine.
Morag embraces her resuscitated brother, vowing to stay by his side to ensure his safety. Nile, however, urges her to take Aegeon's crystal and continue traveling with Rex. This might be the most heartwarming scene in the game. By reminiscing on their childhood, Nile gets Morag to realize what she sincerely longs for in life. She may not want to admit it, but he can see that she struggles with identity. On the surface, Morag is infallibly loyal to Nile, but through her decisions regarding the Aegis, as well as her overall arrogance, there are glimpses of a greater ambition. And that's because she is drawn to power, not political or military, but power that is captivating and whimsical, the kind to be passed down in legends. She even finds Adam to be an inspiration, and thus cannot help but be curious about the Aegis. She longs to be part of Rex's journey because she believes it will be spectacular. Still, she insists on not betraying who she has grown up to be. She refuses to be selfish. And that's why it's so touching when Nile allows her to be. He grants her the permission she is unable to give herself.
You've been tied down long enough. Follow your heart, Morag Lidair.
I have no words. Thank you, Your Majesty. Very well then. I hereby accept the task you have assigned to me.
That's the Morag I know and love. Make me proud.
This chapter is spoiling us, as the voyage to Tantal is another favorite of mine. Pandoria spills the beans on Zeke. After his carefree behavior led to him being disowned by his father, he wandered Alrest until his life was saved by a Malthus. What embellishes this scene is the comedic writing. It is a quintessential example of how enjoyable the party is no matter who is speaking. Pandoria steals the spotlight here, and I for one am delighted because she is the most underrated girl in Xenoblade 2. It makes sense because she is introduced the latest and is the least imperative story-wise, but her personality is so fun. Pandoria is also crucial to entering Tantal, for it is located on a titan named Genbu. Genbu spends most of its time under the sea, so it would be difficult to access without her ability to summon it. Tantal is a nation of extremes. It has the coldest climates in Alrest, yet its music is straight fire. While its sense of scale is worth marveling at, Morag is more impressed by the ancient architecture of the capital, Theoswar. The Tantalese are descendants of Torna, not the band of villains, but Adam's kingdom that was destroyed in the Aegis War. In the palace, King Eulegitimos tears apart Amalthus's letter and seizes Pyra with the intent of killing her for the sake of Alrest. The party is imprisoned, but is soon broken free by Morag's quick thinking and Poppi's capabilities. Zeke and Pandoria would have saved them either way, especially after the former learns of a family secret. They're overwhelmed by the onslaughts of Tantalese knights, but Zeke and Poppi team up to barely save Pyra in the nick of time. Accepting defeat, the king confesses that the royal bloodline is not related to Adam. It was all a lie to unite the nation after his disappearance. With a message from the hero himself, Pyra explains that Adam chose to not return and wanted the Aegis to be free once humans and blades could live in harmony. Despite dodging a huge bullet, it's coming back to haunt us. Its enormous amounts of ether has driven Genbu berserk. In order to save the kingdom, the group heads to the Omega Fetter in hopes of soothing Genbu. Its whereabouts are described via a couple of text boxes from Zeke, and the player had better listen up because Tantal's verticality can otherwise be puzzling. Ironically, you know you're going the right way when Spring Shower Elliot shows up. It's worth the hike because Tantal is mesmerizing, and reaching its bottom is like entering an ethereal abyss. Mithra manages to repair the Omega Fetter and turn Genbu back to normal, but there is no rest for the wary as Akos, Mikhail, and Patroka have set their sights on the artifact. In honor of this deathmatch with Torna, they finally reveal themselves as Flesh Eaters. The main twist of the battle is the weather changer. This will make the timing of blade combos a lot more strict, but it is breakable if you're persistent. Just when it seems like our heroes have overcome Torna, its remaining members arrive. Now that Jin is fully recovered, he is able to ascend to his true form, allowing him to control the elements and obtain the speed of light. He quickly outmatches the party, even a beam from Siren is nothing to him. After he shatters Mithra's sword and incapacitates her, the artificial blades they bought from Bana swoop in to deprive us of any hope of victory. Morag is the last to fall under the hands of Mikhail, whose cocky demeanor notably wanes when Rex refuses to give in. With her friends nearing their deaths, Pyra threatens to kill herself if they are not spared, knowing that Torna needs her alive to open Elysium. Jin reluctantly agrees to her terms, while Nia pleads for her not to go, and a mournful Brigid opens her eyes for the first time. As Pyra collapses in his arms, Jin expresses his disappointment in Rex. He thought he was different from the others, but he turned out to be a fool who neglected Pyra's wounds. Torna takes off with Pyra, leaving Rex to use his last bit of strength to call out in desperation before inevitably collapsing in defeat. Rex regains consciousness 2 days later, having been bedridden from his injuries. With the broken Aegis sword in hand, the reality of his failure sinks in, engulfing him in insecurities he had long been repressing. His youth and inexperience as a driver is regularly looked down on by others, including his allies. And granted, they're not wrong, he isn't a romanticized protagonist. He would have lost several battles if it was not for something bailing him out. Even when it came to saving Pyra from certain death, Rex was helpless. If it wasn't for Poppi and Zeke, all he could have done was watch. And that weakness is why he blames himself for the deaths of Vandam and Hayes, despite it not being his fault. The party is constantly on the run, he barely has time to improve himself. This was never a responsibility he could prepare for, and it was incidental to begin with. But there's no way around it. By becoming the driver of the Aegis, Rex is expected to be a prodigy, not just by the world, but by the player. And he's not. As much as he likes to put on a brave face for his friends, it was bound to disappear, leading him to conclude that he was never meant to be around. And pardon my boldness, this is the only time I'll do this, but you deserve to witness this whole cutscene.
I understand that now. She'll be safe with them. They're not going to hurt her like I do, so I'm leaving. I've just been kidding myself all along. Me, a driver, in the end, salvaging is all...
You bloody idiot! Hurts, yeah? But that pain's nothing compared to what Pyra must be feeling right now. She went with those bastards knowing full well how much it would hurt. For our sake, not hers.
I get it, I know. But what do you want me to do? I couldn't even slow him down. Even the Artifice's attack couldn't touch him. What chance do I have against a guy like that? The more I fight, the more Pyra gets hurt. She'll be better off without me by her side.
Do you actually mean that? Do you not have the slightest idea how it felt for her to leave you?
With me here, he'll suffer even more, lose even more. So maybe Rex is better off without me. Rex, and the whole world, they don't need me. That's just how it feels.
Pyra thought you'd be better off if she was dead. Did you know that? She is planning to sacrifice herself to defeat them.
Huh?
You drove her to this, but here you are, giving up! You said you'd get Pyra to Elysium, didn't you? You'll eat your words just like that?
Hey, Mum, Dad, it's been a while. A ton happened, you know? I became a driver. And this girl is Pyra, my new partner. I know you'd love her. We're going to Elysium, Pyra and me. I don't know what's coming next, but you'll be watching over us, right, guys?
Forget it. We'll rescue her on our own. This loser, he's not the Rex we joined up with. Let him go wherever the hell he wants.
Come now. Let's not start fighting amongst...
Let's give them a chance to work this out, shall we?
You know,
Nia quite right. Rex definitely not behaved like himself. Giving up after one loss? That not Rex I know at all.
But...
Now is not time for excuses!
Poppi! Poppi?
Poppi is hurt to see Rex like this. Poppi and Master Pun are not real Blade and Driver. So Poppi and Master Pun looked up to Rex lots. Rex worked very, very hard to get this far. When Rex tries hard, Poppi and Master Pawn try hard. Rex like bullseye we aim for. Without Rex, we not know which way to go. So please, Rex cannot give up and stop here.
Poppi.
I've been raving about how entertaining the party members are, and I sure plan on demonstrating it later, but if you were to ask me why this cast is my favorites in a JRPG, this scene is exemplary. It is common in JRPGs for the main cast to develop separately, if not outright taking turns. Even at the genre's best, there is likely to be an imbalance of prominence among the party, so much so that the story may belong to a strict few. Although this formula doesn't need to be fixed, Xenoblade 2 proved to me that the most compelling party is one that develops together. Not only are they valuable individually, but they also bring out the best in each other. The story doesn't belong to any of them, because together they are the story. Take Nia and Brigid. The raw passion they exhibit is unrecognizable to their characters mere chapters ago. Nia did not believe in Pyra or Elysium and thought Rex was gullible for doing so. Even when she joined, she took everyone and everything with a grain of salt. But here she is now, refusing to leave Pyra, much like Rex refused to leave her in Torigoth. Brigid went from existing for Morag to acting on her own emotion. She was skeptical of Morag's leniency towards the group, solely viewing the Aegis as power. But after seeing how vulnerable yet selfless Pyra was, she grew fond of her as a living being. These two became Pyra's biggest supporters in spite of their own doubts, while Rex found his biggest supporter to be an equally unlikely outcome, Poppi. Similar to Zeke, Poppi debuted as comic relief. When she wasn't carrying the team, she mainly served as a wholesome, silly robot that occasionally roasts Tora. But as time goes on, she gradually becomes as empathetic as a human being. In fact, her voice direction changes to reflect that. It started as the usual robotic and monotone, but after reconciling with Lila, it becomes expressive and peppy.
Amazing, incredible, amazing, incredible. Master Pawn, you can do it. Master Pawn, you can do it. Ba ba ba, here we go. Ba ba ba, here we go!
The thing is, most players won't notice the change, not because it isn't appreciable, but because the development of Poppi is so natural that sounding human-like isn't out of place. I have to applaud this, because a robot gaining human emotions is a trope that's done to death, yet is typically pointed out to the audience as if it isn't. But Xenoblade 2 respects the player's intelligence. They know it's been done to death, so instead of shoving it in your face, it just happens over time. Whether you realize it or not, your perception of Poppi changes. And through her growth, she can now articulate the effect Rex has had on Tora and herself, the same effect he has had on everyone around him. Rex is expected to be a prodigy, not just by the world, but by the player. And he's not. He's just a kid with dreams. But that's what his friends love about him. And right now, that's all he needs to be. Rex is summoned by Euloginomos, who discloses a long-standing blackmail by Amalthus. In the aforementioned letter, Amalthus demanded the Omega Fetter in exchange for not exposing the family's lineage. This is what provoked the king to take matters into his own hands, dreading Indal's possession of the Aegis. Now that he knows he can trust Rex, he proposes the existence of a third Aegis sword that embodies their true power. It has been speculated to be sealed away in Leftheria, a myth turned reality by Gramps. In the meantime, Mallow sheds light on Pyra threatening suicide. To sever Rex from her fate, Pyra would have transferred the remainder of her core crystal to him, thereby restoring his heart. An Aegis can survive for a brief time without their crystal, and Pyra was prepared to cut it even shorter. I want you to remember this exposition, as it is often forgotten by those trying to point out plot holes. I suppose I can't be too hard on them, because its presentation isn't particularly interesting. At Fonset, Gramps reveals that Adam was the founder of the village and assigns him with the task of being its protector. Just like the ship in Chapter 1, Adam placed a seal on Fonset's shrine that requires a touch of a Letharian. Opening it will unveil a passageway to the Spirit Crucible Elpis, where the third Aegis sword lies in its depths. This is no ordinary cavern, for it contains particles that fatigue blades. It will take its toll on the bulk of the party, in addition to Thunderbolt Zeke. Zeke is a blade eater and experiments akin to flesh eaters, except he was born human. When Zeke's adventures got the best of him, Pandoria dragged his body until they were found by Amalthus. To save Zeke's life and Pandoria's memories, Amalthus extracted part of her core crystal onto his chest. This is a fantastic twist for 3 reasons. First and foremost, this is by far the most serious look at Zeke and Pandoria, and once again, they crush it. Despite knowing Zeke survives, it is heartbreaking to see them at their lowest. Secondly, the scar from the operation is right there! It's not clear as day, but it is noticeable enough to reward the player's curiosity. Third, the encounters with Zeke are full of superhuman feats, because he is superhuman. If he was any other driver, the player would find it peculiar, but because of the tone of his cutscenes, the quirk is masterfully disguised as comedic effect. It may also explain why he and Pandoria are frequently in sync, but according to my headcanon, they practice their choreography. Kudos to those who have noticed something different about Pandoria. We now have access to her beautiful eyes. Subtle environmental changes like this and Poppi's voice warrant credit for enriching the storytelling. Spirit's Crucible Elpis is generally known as the most frustrating stretch in Xenoblade 2. Blades omitting Poppi are severely nerfed, there is an endless number of aggressive monsters, and the path forward can be rather intricate. Now prepare to roll your eyes as I claim that when it comes to difficulty, the Elpis is the most overrated sequence in the game. Don't get me wrong, it is hard, but subsequent areas will be more challenging if only because each and every enemy here is avoidable until the very end. There is no situation where running away is not a valid strategy. Even this gargantuan spider can be snuck around. I've tuned into many first playthroughs on Twitch, and more often than not, the player gets through this without too much trouble. That's not to say I don't have any grievances, because these phantasms are irritating. Whenever there are less than 5 of them, any phantasm can duplicate itself once their HP is under 30%. To quell this agonizing loop, they have to be defeated all in one go, ideally with a chain attack. Alternatively, the duplication will mercifully end after defeating 20 phantasms. Once you know the trick or have the patience, there isn't really much to worry about. I'm just not a fan of these gimmicky battles, and the slower you figure this one out, the crazier you'll be driven. Throughout the Elpis, a debilitated Nia takes a page from Shellhead and opens up about her backstory. She belonged to an upper-class Gormott driver whose fortune was expended on a cure for his daughter's illness. The loss of their riches forced them to become drifters, a lifestyle too harsh for the daughter to survive. In a horribly disturbing act, Nia's driver made her consume his daughter's body so that she could serve as his new child. He ended up perishing sometime after, leaving her alone with a single core crystal, Dromark. From there on, the taboo nature of a flesh eater would cause Nia and Dromark to be relentlessly chased down by the Indoline Praetorium. Their impending capture would then be alleviated by Jin, thus beginning their allegiance to Torna. Let's circle back to Nia's introduction to Rex. At the time, it seemed hypocritical for her to chastise him for being young, but in reality, that was the first hint at her being a blade. Furthermore, you may recall me praising this conversation for alluding to Nia's past. With the information we have now, we can see that it alluded to her loss of family, her desire for a place to call home, and more importantly, the fact that Rex is the first non-familial human being she can relate to. After all, Nia's deep-rooted fear of being herself stems from the way humans have shunned and abused her. It was this trauma that prevented her from saving several lives, including Vandam, the second human being to show her genuine kindness. And it's no coincidence that accompanying his death is Drifting Soul, a song whose title and lyrics represent Nia's personal struggles. However, no longer will she continue to watch others suffer. With Rex by her side, Nia gains the confidence to believe that there are those who will accept her, starting with herself. Declaring her love for Rex, Nia reveals her true self to fend off the droves of phantasms. She may be imbued with power and grace, but Rex does her one better.
Nia, I love you too. I love you and all you guys.
Iconic. Rex's voice actor nails that line. And Nia's reaction is so refreshing that this awkward exchange is comical yet heartwarming. I don't know why some people are throwing a pity party. Well, I do know why. It obviously sucks to get friend-zoned, and people are particularly hurt when it happens to fictional characters. But of course Nia isn't shattered by Rex's crush on Pyra. Hell, she playfully teases Rex and Mithra about it on multiple occasions. It is lovely to see someone comfortably confess their feelings, expecting nothing in return, purely with the intent of expressing it. I mean, come on guys, stop pretending like it's Xenoblade 1. Moved by his benevolence and resilience, Adam's spirit meets Rex in a dream of Elysium. Adam reminds Rex that there are limits to one's power, but he already possesses the kind he needs to protect.
Your will to fight comes from your will to protect. Blades and mortals are linked. When you take on the weight of all the fear she carries, then you will be her true driver.
Rex awakens to the third Aegis sword, and by drawing it from its pedestal, it vanishes. Though the group is distraught, he reassures them that they are ready to save Pyra. With the cat out of the bag, Nia can freely switch between a driver and blade. The main drawback of Blade Nia is none of her arts can contribute to a driver combo, and to be fair, if they could, she would be OP. She is an excellent healer, so for the most part, the player shouldn't have to be afraid of sacrificing her driver form. Now that we have a firm understanding of who's a driver, who's a blade, and who's both, allow me to blow your minds. In the English dub, there is a wide variety of accents that can be heard throughout Alrest. The Gormotti are Welsh, the Urayans are Australian, the Ardainians are Scottish, the Letharians are Northern English, the Tantalese are Southern English, and the Indoline are American. Say what you will about the dub, but you have to acknowledge how immersive the world feels thanks to these nuances. But what about blades, you ask? Well, since Indal controls blades, the majority of blades have American accents. As a result, it is possible to discern that Torna are blades long before their reveal. I am enamored by these types of details that are right in the audience's face, yet take an astute mind to interpret as a hint. Speaking of Nia, she is an exception to the accent rule. It's a sneaky red herring with a logical explanation. Her upbringing in Gormott led her to adopt the proper characteristics. The accent wasn't the only effect on her speech, as before this journey, she exclusively interacted with the high class and Torna. Therefore, it makes sense that she doesn't know what one-eyed monster means. I'm telling you guys, there are levels to this writing. Pyra is held captive at the Cliffs of Morytha, a rotting titan corpse near the World Tree. The party is welcomed by Malos, but this is not the Malos we've known. This is Malos in his prime. He used Pyra's crystal to rehabilitate himself to his former glory, deleting her memories in the process. His power gets straight to the point, destroying anything it touches. He even whooped Ophion before taming it. But luckily, Nia has the opposite. the power of regeneration. Naturally, this is a tough fight. Malos is unlike anything we've ever fought before. Huh. Cool. While Malos avoids any physical harm, Nia alters his cell replication until he is driven over the edge. It's a pretty badass moment, but we'd be naive to expect that to defeat an Aegis. With no more use to Malos and Jin, Pyra's body is disposed of towards Rex, unresponsive to his remorse. He admits to the foolishness Jin accused him of before. As selfless as he's been, he wasn't considerate of Pyra and Mithra's feelings. He was so focused on the paradise of Elysium that he never wondered why someone with their power would want to go there. Because of that, Pyra and Mithra felt more and more alone, whereas all the while Rex believed they were walking side by side. In the face of an unwinnable battle, Rex rallies his friends one last time to bring Pyra and Mithra to Elysium. This is my favorite chapter in Xenoblade 2. Yes, it is the most difficult, with 2 vicious areas alongside the hardest boss fights thus far. But that difficulty is earned. It is appropriate, as this is the lowest point for our heroes. The emotions are at an all-time high, and you feel it. You feel each and every bit of how devastating it was to lose Pyra and Mithra, and you feel how far we have to scratch and claw to even have a chance at saving them. We dug out of a bottomless hole and climbed an insurmountable mountain just to find out our greatest challenge is at the top. No other chapter could portray this amount of drama and desperation, and no other chapter could pay it off.
Enough. Give up, Rex. Forget about us.
Rex, please listen to what we have to say.
Our power has done nothing but bring you pain. It would be better if such a power didn't exist. We told you we wanted to go to Elysium, but the reason why we wanted to go there was to beg our father to let us die.
Pyra and Mithra plead for Rex to give up and reach Elysium without them. But Rex insists on not only keeping his promise, but also making them feel like they belong. Before Jin can land the final blow, Pyra and Mithra ask Rex if he is sure he wants the burden of their power, to which he simply replies with a question of his own.
Tell me, do you love this world?
Yes, Nia, Zerda, and you, Rex. I love this world because you're in it.
Well then.
And thus awakens the true power of Pyra and Mithra, Numa. Technically, we're not supposed to know her name yet, but it is written on her chest, and I don't blame anyone for not noticing. Rex receives a new form of his own as he commands a dismantling of Malos and Jin with the power of character design. After an epic battle, Rex and Numa note the melancholy in Jin's eyes and refuse to finish him off. An undeterred Malos brags about his aim for Ion, the ultimate artifice that is locked away in Elysium. When he summons Ophion to do his bidding, Numa counters with Siren, ensuing another epic skirmish where both sides are inflicted with consequences. As much as I want to cherish this sequence for how emotional and climatic it is, it does contain the worst Rex voice direction in the dub. It's not as bad as I remembered, but this is the one time I actually wished I was playing in Japanese. I suppose it's like the monkey's paw for how well the friendzone line was delivered. Also, the game never goes into why Pyra and Mithra retain their memories. Aside from anime, I'm assuming it's because Malos didn't even know a third form existed, so he couldn't be thorough if he tried. Nonetheless, everything I said about this being my favorite chapter stands tall. Although it ironically ends on a cliffhanger, I shall now begin covering the DLC Expansion Pass. Its story content was initially planned to occur after this chapter, and while it might seem like weird timing, you'll find it works best from a spectator's point of view. The material isn't required, so you may skip ahead if you'd like, but I strongly advise staying tuned if you can. Priced at $30 USD, the expansion pass includes numerous perks for the base game coupled with a 15+ hour prequel adventure. That's a solid deal if you ask me, though admittedly I'm biased because I paid $40 for a physical copy. The player can immediately receive a multitude of useful items, the most notable being legendary core crystals, overdrives, ether for Poppi swap, and love sources, a pouch item with a massive boost in trust. There's also 20 extra side quests, including one where Grampy Pond turns out to be alive with a new blade to offer, the Poppi Buster. What separates them from other blades is they can be equipped by any driver without the need of an overdrive. There are 2 more blades that can be recruited in Argentum, Corvin and Cross Sets. Considering it requires no progress or effort to get them, I think they are way too powerful. I don't even bother with Corvin. The most significant addition to the base game is the non-canon Colosseum Mode, where our heroes meet up with Shulk and Fiora from Xenoblade 1 and Elma from Xenoblade X. The fan service is a delight. It's a bummer they can't be used outside of this mode without putting in some work first. At least it won't be nearly as much of a grind as unlocking new outfits for the party, and we all know what's the priority here. The swimsuits are genuinely awesome, Morag's being my personal favorites. The grind is somewhat justified by the spoilers on Nia and Zeke, and it won't take too long anyway when utilizing the custom difficulty. Just turn all those sliders down and voila, can't hide those swimsuits, baby! Unfortunately, this segment will have to end on a sour note. The custom difficulty is one of few gameplay options that are gatekept as DLC. None of them are essential by any means, but there's no excuse for them not to be free. It doesn't matter if they end up used or not, the mere access to such flexible options would instill confidence in the player. Regardless, it's time for the main event. Torna, the Golden Country. Jin and Laura are mercenaries enlisted to help the world during the Aegis War. Taken into their care is Mikhail, a despondent orphan from a village destroyed by bandits. The trio is attacked by a gargoyle, one of Malos's artifices, until they are rescued by Mithra and Prince Adam. Without his mask on, Adam recognizes Jin as the Paragon of Torna, whose core crystal was stolen 17 years ago. Resisting arrest, Jin and Laura have no choice but to fight. This is the coolest way to start this DLC, with Jin and Laura demonstrating their strategy of passing the former sword. It's a unique style that would go down in history as evidenced by the base game. It certainly wins over an elated Adam, who never meant any harm. After reuniting with Hayes and Adam's little go-getter Milton, the party agrees to band together on the quest to defeat Malos. Jin isn't too enthusiastic about Mithra, citing her lack of compassion, so Adam encourages her to not isolate herself from the others. Before aiming for Malos, Adam offers to help find Laura's estranged mother in Torigoth, only to discover her grave among the village's remains. The party is mistaken as thieves by Bridget and the Empire, causing a battle in which Bridget compares Mithra's fighting style to a simpleton's. A provoked Mithra recklessly calls on Siren until Hayes is forced to intervene.
Is this... you? What the hell? She's our enemy!
Adam plainly ordered you to stop. Or didn't you hear him, simpleton?
Oh yeah, did I mention this DLC is a Mithra roast session? Forget Malos, her true nemesis will be Bridget, Milton, and Jin. The cattiness is put to an end by Emperor Hugo. Leading Bridget and Aegeon, Hugo is a good friend of Adam and shares his sentiments of not being fit for the throne. The group collaborates on their info on Malos, sans Laura and Hayes, who stay behind to honor the graves. This provides an opportunity for an ambush, led by the man who stole Jin's crystal in the first place, Gort. Gord has been stalking Laura in order to avenge his former right arm, so Jin promptly ensures to cut both of them off this time. Jin spares Gort at Laura's request, though unbeknownst to them, he is captured by Indal. The player is then welcomed to the fabled kingdom of Torna for a rendezvous with Adam's forces in Aletta. This is when the flashback in Chapter 5 takes place, where our heroes learn of Malus's plan to invade the capital. When a behemoth decides to intrude, they are saved by the Flesh Eater who would eventually become a playwright, Minoth. Minoth is on bad terms with his driver, Amalthus, so he offers to join the adventure under Adam's command. With our party fully assembled, now is a good time to get into the differences in gameplay. Right off the bat, there are quality of life improvements such as a tutorial menu, superior tutorials, autosaving, and distinguishable collection points. Suffice to say, these should have been patched into the base game. Since there are no towns to speak of as of yet, campsites have been implemented in their place. This is my favorite change, as it centralizes the inn, crafting, and pouch items in a manner that enhances the camaraderie of the group. Plus, the artwork for each member's role is adorable. The most drastic changes apply to combat, where a driver and their blade can swap between the front and back lines. Frequent swapping is encouraged by a myriad of arts dependent on their position, the recovery of their collective HP, and the contribution to driver combos. Each character also has a talent art, a one-of-a-kind ability that usually requires a condition to be met. These features are terrific for increasing the flow of combat and allowing the direct control of blades, a fantasy of every Xenoblade 2 fan. It's no secret why a lot of players will prefer this battle system, and I would have too if it wasn't for the dramatic revision of blade combos. There is no gacha or any form of optional party members, so to compensate for the reduced numbers, the combo tree is irrelevant. Any combination of elements can incite a blade combo. Most of the original routes are presented in the same fashion and will deal extra damage, but they won't really matter because who needs a blade combo anyway? Remember, in the base game, the main purpose of completing a blade combo was to add an elemental orb that would extend a chain attack. But in Torna the Golden Country, an elemental orb is added by a measly special attack. With orbs accumulating so rapidly, full bursts are no longer the embodiments of gratification. They used to be a stunning achievement that demanded skill and efficiency. Now, they're just a win condition. I don't mean to imply that this sullies the combat, that would be a gross exaggeration. There's a ton of fun to be had, and like I said, it's not unusual to prefer how streamlined it is. But for me, just because it's faster doesn't mean it's better. While the base game may start slower, it's much more satisfying in the long run. On the road to the capital is Hyber Village, Jin's residence in a previous life. He uncovers his old journal and is shocked by its contents, but plays it cool when Laura steps in. When she's inspired by a group photograph, the rest of the gang jumps in for a moment that will surely age just fine. That night, Laura and Milton share their respective pasts, the latter traveling with Adam ever since he saved his village. Laura encourages the children, as helping fellow orphans is what makes her feel like she has a family, an outlook that brightens an apathetic Mikhail. Mithra admires this cordial scene from afar, and though her sleeping habits strike again, her appreciation resumes when Laura and Adam agree to keep the children in their care. Since the party has been growing closer, let's get more acquainted with them ourselves. Jin behaves exactly as you'd expect, and that is far from an insult. His cold-blooded traits are surrounded by an alluring air of kindness. It's something you'll want to savor. Laura, on the other hand, is a real surprise. In my opinion, she is currently the most likable main protagonist in Xenoblade. She may be gentle and affectionate, but don't mistake it as weakness. Her respect has to be earned. Rounding out her team is Hayes, who is regrettably one of my disappointments. Her naive determination to help is endearing, but she is often left in the shadow of the emphasis on Jin and Laura. She even points this out to Laura, but not much really changes. The most intimate moment they share is a scene that already existed in the base game. Considering her inevitable fate, her bond with Jin and Laura would have been worth conveying to a greater extent. A character I have mixed feelings on is Hugo. He's a good boy, but I just think he's a less interesting version of Niall. I can fathom being in the minority on that, and at the very least, he has more going for him than a Geon. A Geon is a Geon. He isn't quite fleshed out by the extra screen time. It's a good thing the Empire has their jewel, because Bridget is a highlight. Much like the base game, she has no patience for BS, and her rivalry with Mithra is the culmination. The pettiness on display is so funny to me.
Your sword fighting is so boorish, Mithra. You remind me of a rabid Gogol, the way you swing that sword around.
Oh, you're gonna say that to me? You with your swords that stretch out like Ardainian dog leashes? Actually, I just imagine you walking around with 2 dogs, and I gotta say, it might be kind of a good look for you.
Minoth is a similar case to Hayes, in that I wish he had more to work with, but he is entertaining. His distant, brash personality is an effective foil to Adam. They love to troll each other since they go way back. Speaking of His Highness, Adam lives up to all of the suspense around him. I can summarize him with 2 words, both starting with H: heroic and himbo. He is much more charismatic and jocular compared to a boy of Rex's age, but they do have some things in common. They share a few mannerisms, they have the same eye color, and they're both optimistic, for better and for worse. On the contrary, however, becoming an Aegis driver has ridden him with concern because, like Rex, he hasn't been afforded the time he needs. He fears he won't be able to control Mithra's powers, and his belief in humanity isn't as unshakable as it seems. But although Adam doesn't thoroughly comprehend Mithra, he tries his best to make her feel welcome.
Adam, you dumbass! Pay attention! And you want to be the driver of the Aegis?
Their relationship is my favorite within the party. In spite of her frustrations with him, his influence on her is so tangible that it's no wonder why she holds him in high regard. He affects her in even minute illusions, like how she ended up being a big softie like him. Mithra has her own developments, of course, primarily having to do with connecting with others. This is humorously characterized in her affinity charts. Its hardest unlock is Girls Talk, a skill she has no use of until the base game. On a serious note though, feel free to prefer Pyra's design and personality, but especially with this DLC, I am not having any claims of her being the better character. Pyra may be easier to appreciate at surface level, but Mithra shines brighter the more you play the game. There is so much depth to her. She is the backbone of not only Torna, but also the entire narrative.
You can join in, you know.
What's that?
You don't need to ostracize yourself for being an Aegis.
That's not what I'm...
I happen to think you've got a lot going for you, you know?
In Arisco, the kingdom's capital, the party attends a conference in preparation for Malos. Among the audience are the Tornan king, Quaestor Amalthus, and High Prince Zetter. The king and Amalthus pledge their support to Adam's cause, while Zetter is extremely jealous of his popularity and of his resonance within Aegis. His priorities change when the invasion suddenly begins. After defeating a few of his gargoyles, our heroes have a long-awaited confrontation with Malos. This fight does not pull any punches, and despite my previous rants, it felt pretty good to end it with a full burst from Mithra. The battle is just heating up though, as Mithra and Adam borrow Jin and Laura's fighting style to catch Malos off guard. But he isn't deterred in the slightest, even Hayes can't bring him down. In what is perhaps the most badass action sequence in Xenoblade 2, Malos proceeds to take on each of our party members at the same time, fending them off one by one, with Jin being the last to strike. He then heads off to undo the Tornan Seal, an ancient means to restrain the Titan's calamitous power. The group tries to stop him by way of Gramps, yet is ultimately too late. Gramps recalls his days with Jin in the latter's previous life, and when visiting the Tornan womb, Adam reveals that blades will eventually be reborn as Titans. Titans then give birth to core crystals and provide themselves as habitat, thereby creating an endless cycle of life. Once things have settled down, the king wishes to award Laura's bravery by knighting her. As an official of Torna, Jin is now ridden of his need to hide his identity. His mask will no longer appear in gameplay, but he is taking care of it since Laura was the one who made it for him. She finds solace in this gesture, knowing that a piece of her will remain with him even when she dies. Jin later catches up with Gramps privately, contemplating the eternal existence of their kind.
It may be this is exactly what they wanted. Become Titans. Have a longer life with humans. Huh?
Oh, nothing. I was just remembering the previous time you said that.
I did?
My reply was, how about you? And what do you think you said?
I don't wish for forever. All I want is my life with her. That's plenty.
Gramps affirms that Jin will be ready for new relationships, but he has a hard time accepting he is bound to forget everyone. At this point, the player will reach a hurdle in their journey. This is the second time that story progression is locked away by community level. Community is gained by befriending NPCs, a task that can be generalized as completing side quests. While forced side quests are typically a displeasure, I'm not criticizing them on principle. It's more so the fact you have to reach level 4. We just reached level 2 in order to unlock Malos's invasion. 2 extra levels may not sound like much, but that equates to a few hours without any progression in the story. And maybe that wouldn't sting as much if there wasn't already padding throughout the DLC. To be fair, I get why it's required. The game wants you to get as intimate as possible with Torna so its destruction can leave the largest impact. And although I don't agree with this method, I can't deny it works. Torna has 2 of my favorite areas in Xenoblade 2, being Arisco and the desert. I never imagined I would say that about a desert in any video game, but even in a world as splendid as Alrest, the desert manages to stand out. As for Arisco, it's like merging the coziness of Fonset with the liveliness of Torigoth. So, to honor the Golden Country, I will briefly cover my top 3 side quests. Bolstering Sales depicts a Nopon argument over whether or not they should be naked. Specifically, they're a pair of merchants who figure their sales would be bolstered if they modeled their clothing wares. The player will choose between 2 options, but either way, the sales end up skyrocketing. Forest Trail Antics is an investigation of littering in the woods. The culprits are 4 delinquent Nopon who are terribly uncoordinated and take pride in running from conflict. After a round of hide-and-seek, it turns out they were too embarrassed to admit they missed their elderly friends, so they littered on her walks to gain her attention. Modern problems require Nopon solutions, folks. Last but not least, the Great Tornin Cook-Off. The contestants include Jin and Mithra, who are on opposite ends of the cooking spectrum. Unlike her future half, Mithra's cuisine is an acquired taste, though I admire her confidence. For Jin, the player decides between dinner or dessert. Dinner will not win the contest, but it has higher rewards because winning isn't everything, I guess? Dessert will cinch the victory, and Mithra takes credit for accentuating it with her awful dish. Now that we're Tornins at heart, the final battle with Malos is looming. The adults struggle to console Milton over leaving him and Mikhail behind. He comes to terms with it thanks to Mithra of all people, reminding him that his safety is helping Adam. Mithra then has her first heartfelt moments with Jin, albeit with a sliver of bickering. She still has trouble empathizing with a driver and Blade's bond, so Jin reassures her that her time is yet to come. Our heroes leave for Malos the next morning, having to trek through the interior of the Titan. Not quite as pretty as the insides of a whale, but it is deserving of its penultimate status. Malos awaits at the Titan's core, plotting its demise with an army of gargoyles. The trigger can be pulled at a moment's notice, but instead, he spares the party 10 minutes to stop him. Mithra tries to buy time by summoning Ophion, yet it quickly succumbs to the sheer number of opponents. When Jin collides with Malos, the latter warns him of Laura's compassion being an exception to humanity rather than the rule. The final boss fight then commences in the midst of a duel between opposing sirens. Chain attacks cannot be relied on. In their place are siren attacks that either parties can charge to gain an edge over the other. Honestly, Malos does a piss poor job of charging his siren, but that doesn't change how epic this scenery is. It magnificently captures the sensation of an all-out war. Chain attacks return in the back half of the fights, presenting an opportunity for a decisive overkill. Unimpressed by his fellow Aegis, Malos goads her on by laying waste to Arisco. The grief overcomes Mithra, forcing her to lose control and awaken a portion of Numa's power. After an explosive clash in the air, the Aegises enter their sirens to engage what would be remembered as the tragedy of the Aegis War. Adam's cries fall on deaf ears as Mithra engulfs Torna in her attempts to defeat Malos. Malos cheers her on, stating that this is what the architect meant for them to be. Mithra pleads with herself to prove him wrong, begging herself to protect.
I just want to save.
Mithra unleashes one final blast that incapacitates Malos and demolishes the Tornan Titan. At Arisco, Zetter tries to get the king to safety, but he chooses to fall alongside his kingdom. The Empire has their own catastrophe in the loss of Hugo, who sacrificed himself to save Adam in the crossfire. When Mithra regains consciousness, the party board a rescue ship and mourn the harrowing casualties. Mithra is consumed by guilt, reaching her breaking point at the sight of Milton's corpse, and when she reaches out in disbelief, Mikhail pulls him away in terror. Loathing her existence, Mithra vanishes into flames, forming a new identity, Pyra. That sweet, affable girl we've all grown to love, she is a defense mechanism in response to trauma. Mithra deliberately created the antithesis of herself because she hates herself. Her cocky, sarcastic personality was often scolded, and even when she had a chance to form a bond, she impulsively isolated herself. Because to her, she is a weapon, and a weapon doesn't deserve to be loved. The group parts ways sometime afterwards in Gormott. After sealing away Pyra, a normally jubilant Adam is last seen with a frown. I feel so bad for him. He rightfully had the kingdom cheering him on, and his legacy will become that of a hero's. But in his own eyes, he was a failure. It's heartbreaking that Mithra was unable to express how much Adam meant to her, something he really needed to hear. On the other side of Alrest, Laura and the others get a visit from a forgotten adversary. Indal's experiments turned Gort into a Blade Eater, albeit a grisly prototype. Laura vanquishes Gort in a thankfully unlosable fight, avenging the abuse he put her and her mother through. Jin and Hayes lament the world's uncertain future, but Laura instills hope back into them. As they search for Adam's militia, Amalthus rises in power through various devious means. He meets with Zetter along the way, presumably to arrange the conspiracy that would give birth to Tantal. When Amalthus becomes the Praetor, he swiftly orders an invasion, and standing in his way is Laura, Hayes, and Jin. This isn't the last I'll mention of Torna, the Golden Country, but I'm sure you already understand how valuable it is to the narrative. While I have my qualms about the gameplay and none of the story is crucial, nothing heightens appreciation like experiencing the tragedy. And given where I've inserted it, you must be dying to see if there is a light at the ends of the tunnel. So let's get back into it, shall we? Through the Cloud Sea, our heroes fall into a city in ruins, the Land of Morytha. Numa reverts back to Mythra, who brings about the worst offense in Xenoblade 2.
Rule 5 of the Salvager Code. Always be...
I don't think we need to hear it. Come on, let's go.
Hey! At least let me finish, spoiled sport.
We'll never learn the 5th rule of the Salvager's Code! Mythra describes Numa as her and Pyra simultaneously, rather than a divergent personality. Since Pyra and Mythra would be redundant, and Pythra is stupid, the player has to select their preference of name. Despite your intuition, this bears no significant consequence, there's just valid reasons for both. Mythra is her original form, but the party has known Pyra for longer, so obviously Mythra is morally correct. In any case, Rex notably compares Numa to coffee with milk, which became a spoiler-free term that fans latched onto. As much as the community is grating at times, I will always respect how dedicated they are to not spoiling for others. I applaud Sakurai for holding back too. He could have made Numa a final smash like a certain other spoiler, but he opted to tuck her away as a spirit. In doing so, we received our first official render of Numa, and it imbues radiance. Rex and Mythra stumble upon an assault on a wounded Jin. The former insists on intruding, but when the monster stays resilient, it's Bridget, Poppi, and Gramps to the rescue. After Numa heals Jin, they reluctantly call for a ceasefire until they escape Morytha. And it isn't mere formality, Jin is actually playable. This is being spoiled in a good way. Some players may miss out on this because it's so unexpected. Equally as shocking is Morytha. Aside from being unsettling, it is nothing like any area we've been to yet. Just when you think you know the answers, the game changes the questions. While stopping for a rest, Bridget asks Jin if she is anything like the Bridget in her journal, but he isn't that receptive. Mythra and Poppi then reflect on the advanced civilization of Morytha. Mythra figures their technology must have led to their destruction, raising Poppi's concern over her existence. The two find common ground in this fear, and when Poppi requests to be destroyed if she gets out of hand, Mythra graciously accepts on a condition she'll think of later. You know these are two of the best characters when they can effortlessly turn a dismal conversation into a heartwarming scene. Meanwhile, Torna is diving through the Cloud Sea to get to Morytha. Although the plunge is strenuous on their ship, Mikhail refuses to leave Jin behind. And upon the hideous sight of Morytha, he begins to doubt they are justified in their intent on annihilation. In the thick of the rubble is the Tornan Titan, where it lays there ravaged alongside its offspring. To those who skipped the DLC, Titans give birth to core crystals, and if a Blade's crystal survives long enough, they will evolve into a Titan themselves. The Kingdom of Torna honored this life cycle by treating humans and Blades as equals. But something changed after Adam and Mythra disappeared. Though its Titan may have been eradicated by Mythra, the true downfall of Torna came at the hands of Amalthus. The Praetor led an invasion that would extinguish its remnants, one of whom being Laura. Succumbing to fatal injuries, she remarks how being forgotten is a much worse fate than death.
Jin, the thought of you forgetting me, it's like one heart is being ripped in two. I'm so sorry to do this to you.
There is one way. One final chance. A way that we can be together.
Recalling the findings of his previous self, Jin murders Laura and eats her heart as a last resort, becoming a flesh eater in order to save his memories of her. He eliminates the remaining Indoline with his newfound power, but is traumatized by Laura's death and his role in it. For 5 centuries, Jin had to watch everyone enable, if not worship, the same man who deprived many of their loved ones. It's no wonder he has no faith in humans. He was never allowed a chance to heal because Amalthus became too fundamental to the world. He controls the relationship between most drivers and blades. All Jin was allowed was time to resent. He learned to despise the Architect for not intervening, and Mithra for running away when the world continued to need her. And Amalthus was so ruthless because he was desperate to locate her. Amalthus feared Blades and Titans after the Aegis War, so he was compelled to govern them at all costs. In spite of this revelation, Rex calls out Jin's goals as a bluff. Now that he understands Pyra and Mithra's depression, he can recognize that Jin is no different. I have to back Rex up here. A consistent strength of the storytelling is Jin's facial expressions. He can say so much while speaking so little. His emotions when Laura dies destroy me every time. Suddenly, the party is ambushed by a gigantic creature. The rest of our friends enter the fray, but what really turns the tide is Numa. To begin with, Numa grants Rex the ability to wield any blade in the party without the use of overdrives. Not that they'll be needed, because once per battle, Numa can be summoned by having a full party gauge and gold affinity with Pyra or Mithra. For a brief amount of time, her damage output becomes insanely high, she can change her elements at will, and every elemental orb is subject to her attacks. Thus, she is likely the cause of your first full burst. I'd say she's too overpowered, but I don't care, because it is exhilarating. Once the creature is slain, Rex notices something peculiar in its remains, an ID card belonging to a human being. At the base of the World Tree, Jin is met with hostility from the absent party members, especially Morag. Torna intrudes to welcome Jin with open arms, but he is not as amiable when they try to attack our heroes. Before their departure, Jin reassures Bridget that she is the same as the Bridget he once knew. Gramps tells Rex he kept quiet about Jin because it would have distracted from what he needs to focus on, being Pyra and Mithra. With a renewed determination, Rex is finally ready to reach Elysium, and so begins the climb up the World Tree. This is going to be a wild ride. Looks can be deceiving. This tree is a monumental tower with plenty of mechanical security to boot. It is the real most difficult area in Xenoblade 2. It doesn't have the limitations of the Elpis, but the enemy placements are unforgiving. Exploring it is bewitching regardless. Much like Morytha, the player will feel like they're entering a brand new game, and they won't be able to stop until they find out how it isn't. Simply put, the World Tree has all the makings of an ideal final dungeon. It is one of the greatest in any video game I've played. Outside the tree, Torna hits a speed bump in the form of Indal. Indal attempts to halt their ascents, but Torna is more than prepared for a skirmish. During the climb, there are sporadic flashbacks that explore why Amalthus abhors humanity. Amalthus grew up in an era of perpetual wars. While fleeing with his mother, she pushed him off a cliff to prevent him from being seized, only for him to stumble into her corpse. Finding her assailants asleep, he took the opportunity for a gruesome revenge. As an adult, he openly helped refugees and tended to soldiers' wounds. His kindness would not be reciprocated, as he'd find those same people becoming terrible criminals. After one such incident, he opts to suffocate an infants so they wouldn't have to grow up motherless like him. Through innumerable grim experiences, Amalthus concluded that if Elysium was heaven, then Alrest must be hell. He thus sought out the Architect, hoping to receive answers on how to save Alrest, but as we know now, all he found were the Aegises. He then awoke Malos, and soon found out how much of a mistake that was. Although Malos is uncontrollable, his relentless impulse to cause mayhem was influenced by his driver's despair. Wanting to right his wrong, Amalthus searched for a hero who could resonate with Mithra, but today he is content with controlling her himself. When our heroes disobey his orders to attack Torna, they come to find that the other half of Haze's crystal was on Amalthus all along. By amplifying her power, not only can he restrict blades, he can also command pure ones, including the Aegis. And that's exactly why the artificial blades were produced. Since they aren't real blades, they are immune to his control. Jin and Malos make a run for the World Tree, and I feel like I'm the only one who appreciates this moment.
Hey, when you see our daddy, dear, tell him, thanks for everything from me.
I don't know, I think it's so funny. It's the most casual human moments Malos has, like a middle-aged dad trying to be hip with the kids. Mithra and Torna retaliate by wrecking one of the amplifiers, provoking Amalthus to play his trump card. Since Titans are blades at heart, he summons Mor Ardain to dispose of our heroes. When the party narrowly survives, Amalthus decides that Mor Ardain isn't enough and calls upon the rest of Alrest to ensure his dominance. The nations are helpless to stop him, and Nile is especially panicked for Mor Ardain cannot spare any more energy. In the midst of the chaos, Mikhail urges Akos and Patroka to board the World Tree while he handles it alone. Mikhail had been covertly working on a secret weapon for this occasion, transforming their ship into a mechanical titan. This conflict is personal to Mikhail, who unlike his crew is a Blade Eater. He was one of the Tornan refugees who Indal experimented on to perfect the Blade Eater technology. The refugees were massacred to keep the practice secret, but Mikhail lived on. To assist him, we aim for higher ground to get a good shot at Indal. Chapter 9 is the shortest chapter in the game, but the World Tree may feel forever. There is no avoiding its security. One room even has a unique monster blocking the exits. Once we're close enough, Poppi lifts off towards Indal with Rex and Mithra, dodging a barrage of lasers in the process. Amalthus' amplifiers are successfully wiped out by Numa, and her and Rex just barely make it back to the World Tree. Enraged by their defiance, Amalthus sends a thunderous beam towards the party, and when all hope seems lost, they are saved by Mikhail.
But you know what? There were people I loved, once. When I look at you guys, it reminds me of them. I wonder if the people I loved were still around. Would things be different? I wonder that. And I start doubting myself.
It's never explicitly stated, but Rex in particular takes Mikhail back. His adolescent optimism is reminiscent of his beloved friend, Milton. Mikhail used to always hide his emotions, so Milton would lift him up, certain he could get through hardship with a smile. And after Milton fell victim to the Aegis War, all he knew was hardship. And so all he did was smile. Mikhail continues to engage Indal, securing the safety of our heroes. Though he knows his courage is ill-fated, he refuses to relent, and on behalf of himself and Laura, with a smile on his face, he apologizes to Jin for leaving him. Jin and Malos are nearing the top of the World Tree. Malos is insistent on bringing Jin with him, but he declines, feeling his death approaching and seeing a vision of Laura. A reluctant Malos embraces Jin and bids him farewell. Jin then proceeds to make his last stand against the party. In my experience, this is the hardest boss fights in the game. Each and every one of his attacks will leave a mark, and to make matters worse, he can nullify healing. To say the least, Jin was determined to go out with a bang. During the battle, he challenges Rex's resolve, asserting mankind will turn Elysium into ashes, just like they did Morytha. But Rex doesn't waver. He doesn't fear Blades and Titans, rather he is envious, believing the world will survive if humans exist alongside them. Akos and Patroka arrive on the scene, but an exhausted Jin accepts defeat. The reunion is cut short when Patroka is abruptly killed by a Malthus. He absorbs the power of her crystal, as this was the purpose of the core cleansing procedure. Amalthus embraces his hatred of humanity and takes another victim in Akos. There is an attempt to provide the siblings some backstory, but it's a little too late to feel sympathetic. Patroka got the short end of the stick. She is objectively the least compelling member of Torna. Akos, on the other hand, is such an effective asshole that the absence of sympathy isn't much of a downside. Amalthus wreaks havoc, spiraling down into delusions of grandeur. As Jin mourns his fallen brethren, Rex rallies the party together to end the reign of terror over Alrest. While not as punishing as Jin, Amalthus is no pushover. He'll keep healing when his health gets low, and to make it out alive myself, I had to bet everything on a two-man chain attack. The Praetor withstands his beating and threatens to collapse the World Tree. When Rex and Numa get injured protecting Jin, he freezes Amalthus before anyone else is harmed. He expresses his gratitude over Nia having someone to trust, and pleads with Rex to help Malos find an identity of his own. Jin then uses the last of his power to finally avenge Laura, Torna, and the world.
Father, why do you not answer when I call?
This quote encapsulates his desperation to be acknowledged by his creator and his insanity from trying to rationalize mankind. Amalthus is a man playing God, so God would accept him. As detestable as he is, I can spare a shred of pity. For centuries, he wanted to understand why the world had to be as wretched as it was, and why his mother had to die. And after climbing the World Tree to no avail, he settled with conviction. By subjecting the world to his will, he would eventually gain the power to find out why it is exploitable to begin with. But much like God wasn't there for his lowest, he was nowhere to be found at his highest. Alrest's freedom came at a cost, however, for Jin shattered his own core crystal to muster up the strength to kill him. He may not utter a single word in his final moments, but as always, the sight of him speaks volumes. Jin is my favorite antagonist in the Xenoblade series, and one of my favorite characters, period. The ending theme of the story DLC is a moment of eternity. Its lyrics can be interpreted as Laura's hopes of Jin finding peace and moving on. And what a strange twist of fate it was for his former adversary to be the only one to shelter him from the rain.
In the course of a lifetime, a man will see uncountable meetings and partings. Yet, as your life's candle sputters and dies, whose face is it that rises to greet you? Happy is the man who can sleep in the comfort of the smile he sees then. No, I don't wish for forever. Even just for one moment. It's enough if it's with her. And yet, what is the man to do who has not been afforded that chance? The road stretches on without end. I cannot but walk down it. As long as I keep walking, I can hold out hope that one day, the time may come when I see her smile again. That hope keeps me afloat.
Before the finale, I'd like to do a lightning round of some of my favorite parts of Xenoblade 2 that aren't conveyed through the story alone. There is too much content to cover, so I'll be focusing on 3 categories. Blades, excluding the main cast, heart-to-hearts, exclusively the main cast, and gameplay dialogue, excluding exclusivity. Starting with the gacha, my very first rare pull was Cora, who I will forever cherish for her priceless side quest. Offended by her Valley Girl personality, Mythra challenges Cora to one-up her arbitrary sense of girl power.
Do you really think this is a good idea? You're getting a bit aggressive.
Shut up, Rex.
Got it.
The competition comes at the expense of all their female friends, who grow tired of their petty bickering. So, in order to discipline the 2 ladies, they force them to do an embarrassing dance for the party's amusement. My second rare pull was Azami, and although I don't like using her weapon class in battle, I can't help but be endeared to her. She has an unhealthy obsession with her driver, but much like her design, it's creepy in a likable way.
With my eye, no matter how far apart we may be, I can watch my sweetie pie driver wherever they are and whenever I like. Gross.
Just take my word for it. Not only is Percival's design sick, but he's also practically the Batman of Alrest. His side quest is a fitting crime thriller where the violence of his past life comes back to haunt him. Percival excels at fighting a large crowd of enemies, and while this may be situational, it is hype as fuck. Vale is the polar opposite of Cora, being an angsty goth girl, but the 2 do have a major asset in common, a ridiculous side quest. She drags the party along to investigate a Napon cult. Need I say more? Zenobia is one of the coolest blades in the game. Her goal is to prove she is the strongest in Alrest, and she is therefore determined to take on Mythra one day. To complement this, her affinity chart is progressed by defeating unique monsters. If that's not badass, I don't know what is. How could I possibly end this gacha portion without mentioning Cosmos and Telos? These androids are cameos from Xenosaga with pull rates that are drastically low. Telos can only be pulled after beating the game once, but that pales in comparison to Cosmos, whose base rate is 0.1%. Yeah, when people bitch about the gacha, it's probably because they never got her. But don't be too bitter, there are superb options for rare blades outside of the gacha. The only way to make a spider boss worthwhile is by granting a blade who has everything. Wulfric. He's good in battle, he has fantastic field skills, and most of all, he's just misunderstood. Wulfric longs to be a kind and friendly individual, but there's something about him causing strangers to avoid him.
Everyone runs from my voice. That is the problem.
In his heart-to-heart, you can rectify his dilemma by having him help an old woman with poor eyesight. Though onlookers may be terrified, Wulfric succeeds in being the good boy that he is.
Whoa, you're in there, dude. Did you get her number?
Cassandra is a cheery girl with bad luck that rivals Zeke's. Luck is a generous way to put it, it's more that her ominous mask is cursed to bring disaster. I guess that explains why her core crystal was swallowed by a monster. The misfortune of the mask goes unnoticed by Cassandra, who simply considers herself lucky to be alive and have a driver as great as us. She's just so sweet, I love her. When I insist that gacha isn't everything, Praxis and Theory are the gold standard. They are a cut above the rest by starring in 3 side quests together. Praxis and Theory are savage criminals, but after the death of her driver, our heroes claim Praxis as their own. Theory takes issue with this and relentlessly stalks them, and though her memories were wiped, Praxis can tell Theory meant a lot to her. After an emotional confrontation, Theory kills her own driver to prevent him from harming Praxis. The new Theory isn't as loving of Praxis when she awakens, but she does cooperate in repenting for their past. By saving a family's lives and uniting the local community, Theory musters her first smile and finally acknowledges Praxis as her sister. I wasn't aware of this questline in my first playthrough, and I can safely say that it is one of my favorite discoveries when revisiting the game. What these two offer is among the best in Xenoblade 2. I am incredibly grateful I experienced it. Now for talking the best in battle, that belongs to Poppi. Once the player leaves Morytha and views a heart-to-heart in Letheria, they can begin a quest to achieve her secret form. It certainly requires a lot of work and patience, but it'll be worth it with the dawn of Poppi Cutie Pie. I love how her design demonstrates how impactful Rex has been on Tora. She has Mithra's hairstyle, Pyrrhus scarves, and Pyrrhus sword. While we're on the topic, I'd like to claim Poppi as another win for the English dub. In Japanese, Poppi's forms are known as Hana JS, Hana JK, and Hana JD. Hana is identical to Poppi in referring to flowers, but the abbreviations refer to elementary school to university. I'd take Cutie and Cutie Pie any day. The localizers were Brilliance. And to cap off my favorite blades, we have a new Game Plus exclusive, Torna. With the unfortunate exception of Malos and Jin, each member of Torna and their blades can be recruited to the party. Obviously this isn't canon, but it's pretty freaking rad. The next category is heart-to-hearts. There are so many good ones, but I did my utmost to narrow it down to a top 10 in no particular order. Let's begin with a classic, Morag the Chef. When Pyra is unfamiliar with a rare delicacy, Morag can offer to lend her culinary skill. And I'll just let you watch the rest.
Lady Morag, if I may, is this really wise?
Oh, don't you worry yourself. Shall we start by gutting the fish, then?
Excuse me?
What's the matter?
Gut it. Gut this creature.
Well, yes. We can't exactly cook it like that.
Understood. Life is a battlefield. Let us commence. Show it who's boss, Lady Morag. Brigid? Yes? Please hold down its head. What? No, that is, I'd rather not touch it. It's just a little tricky to make the incision when it keeps staring at me. Quite true, but for the love of the architect, do it! Please, at least cover its eyes for me. Yes, ma'am. We cannot let a mere fish get the best of us. Ah! What's wrong? It looked me in the eye. Is this thing still alive? Can it be? Then I must end it before it strikes. It's opening its foul maw. Lady Morag, the enemy means to eat us. Quickly, the finishing blow. Very well. Hellfire!
No, wait! If you do that, the food will be...
Well, Brigid, as befits the Flamebringer, the foe is extinguished without a trace. Phew. Our mission here is done.
What do you think you're doing? There's nothing left for us to eat.
In Rub-a-Dub-Dub, Tora wants to hop into the hot springs with the boys, but little does he know, Morag is not a boy. He tries to instill confidence in her until she inevitably blows his mind, so much so that he shares the knowledge and excitement.
Well, that's that then, I guess.
My, I did not expect this when I woke up today.
Hey, Morag, how about next time you put on a skirt and some heels?
How about you die in a fire, Zeke?
Eternal Rest is aptly named, yet comes with a humorous twist. After Pandoria jokes about Zeke's grave being a snowman in Theoswar, he can ask Morag about where she'd like to be buried.
Where's your grave gonna be, Morag?
My manner of burial is already decided. There is a proud Ardainian tradition to...
Yeah, okay, I'm gonna stop you there. Thanks for the predictable answer.
What? Then ask me again. I will endeavor to make my response more entertaining. Lady Morag, I don't think there is any need to... You are aware of how I dislike to be outdone, are you not?
All right, let's do this. Where's your grave going to be?
A snowman at Theoswar rear gate.
What?
Wait, are you gonna marry into Tantal royalty or something?
What? Of course I will not. I was just imitating Zeke's amusing remark. Perhaps I should have chosen a grave in Fonset instead.
What?
That's also not exactly it.
Looks like Morag's got a thing or two to learn when it comes to the funnies.
Don't worry, Morag, I'll send you off with the more grounded family ties. Morag voices her concerns about Niall, but doesn't think she is deserving of his time. Depending on your choice, Pyra or Mithra will talk Morag into reigniting the bond with Niall instead of treating him like a superior. While Mithra's interruption is funny, this heart-to-heart is a favorite for how touching it is.
That's not exactly...
Shut it! You being worried about your brother makes you family enough. Your stations don't come into it. Just woman up and be a good sister already.
Maybe you're right.
Rex and Zeke have a similar conversation in Hard Life. Zeke doesn't let the spectacle of Alrest get to him because underneath it all, there is an inescapable suffering.
But there are definitely people out there that you have helped. Me and Pyra for a start. So Zeke, don't ever give up. Don't forget. You've got some people you can count on now.
Yeah, you're right. You really are. I don't know what I was thinking. Look out, world! The Zekinator's coming to rock your socks off! Whew! That sure felt good. Your turn, Rex. Let your manifesto out.
I'm gonna get Pyra and Mithra to Elysium or die trying.
Yee-ha!
What are you two doing?
You're embarrassing me.
Adam's appetite is about Theoswar's sales of his favorite spicy treat. When Zeke calls Nia a child for not liking spicy food, Mithra bursts his bubble by revealing that Adam didn't like it either. This whole myth is a marketing scheme. No matter the player's choice, Zeke is in shambles.
Is it your favorite because you believed their shtick about Adam?
Ugh.
Busted!
Is that why you took it to heart? You're like a little kid.
What's wrong with that? I grew up believing this was Adam's favorite food. It's been enchanting kids for 500 years now. I'm not going to let the words of one blade take that away.
Sure. But that still doesn't change the fact that Adam didn't like spicy food. He'd never eat this stuff of his own volition.
Ah! You're shattering my image of him, my precious childhood innocence. I don't believe anyone or anything anymore.
Don't be like that, Shellhead.
Cheer up. I'll buy you an ember cake.
Intending to Turters, the little guy keeps sneaking into Nia's bed every night. If Pandoria offers an abstract solution, Nia starts to understand Turters' motive.
Maybe Dromar could look after him.
Good work. He's basically a big fuzzy pillow.
Actually, the same goes for Tora.
More like a little fluffy pillow, but yes.
Hey, are you two actually just fed up of taking care of Turtles?
Perish the thought, right, Pandy?
Yeah, we love Turters. Sometimes I forget to feed him, but he's great.
I'm starting to understand why he comes running to me every night.
The curse of the Zekinator persists even when he isn't around. Pandoria makes light of how unlucky her prince is, but her tone quickly changes once Bridget and Dromark call her out.
Ah, yes, I see. You pretend to dislike him, while secretly harboring feelings.
Oh, you're so cute when you get embarrassed.
I quite agree.
Hey! Stop that! Don't you give me that knowing smile! Curse you, my prince, and your unlucky nature.
What's in a name is a silly question to a nerd like Zeke, who now wants to call himself the chaotic bringer of chaos. Pyra can yet again show her naive innocence, but even so, she has grown quite a bit since Blushy Crushy.
Just like I thought, Pyra gets me. In fact, maybe you should just be my blade.
I think I'm good, thanks.
Huh?
You're very amusing, Zeke, but drivers need to be a lot more than amusing.
What?
You're going to need an ice art for that burn.
Scathing roasts like that come with the territory when it's Mithra versus Bridget. This is for the real ones who stuck through the DLC. Bridget's journal mentions a single time that she was able to defeat Mithra, but instead of taking the high road, her former rival turns into her current one.
Let me get a look at that journal. I bet it needs a few corrections.
Cut that out. Don't you dare try to taint the truth.
What? Speak up.
Do you really think it's wise to quarrel like this?
This is not a quarrel, Dromark. Withdraw if you want to retain your whiskers.
That's right. This is just a friendly bit of rivalry, so keep your nose out of it. Bridget, you will know my power today. For real.
Mithra, you're going to eat those words.
Well now, you two certainly have a strange concept of friendship.
A low-key running gag is Dromark getting shafted. He always tries to be helpful, but it's often not welcomed, especially by Nia. So you know what? Dromark will be kicking off my favorite gameplay dialogue. There's no need for me to talk here, so I'll see you on the other side.
Flora heals an aching soul.
Anyone else find Poppy's final form distracting? No? Just me?
Poppy does not understand, but Poppy feels very cool in this form.
Zeke's arts are so cool! How's Zeke move like that?
Forget strength or practice. It's all about the single-minded desire to look awesome.
You think that's impressive? Zeke's better at self-promotion than me.
Hey, hang on a sec. I dropped my contact lens.
That's not the first time either. Are you sure you should be dropping it that much?
Don't laugh at my prince. He keeps needing new contacts, and so we end up poor.
Rex, you're getting too heated. Don't lose your cool in battle. That's good advice. I work hard to be cool.
A job well done, Rex. As the Aegis driver, you must be exhausted. How about a back rub?
And which hands were you planning to use?
So tell me, what's your body made from?
Poppy could tell you, but then Poppy would have to kill you.
Gah! My left pec aches from my old war wound.
Wasn't it your right pec last time? Get your story straight, Shellhead. Honestly, Pandoria, I don't know how you put up with all of Shellhead's antics.
Oh, Nia, you're the only one who gets it.
I wish Nia was as ladylike as you, Pyra.
Well, I wish I was as much of a warrior as Nia.
I'm being a lady, all right? A warrior lady. Tora's science know-how saves the day!
Nonsense, old boy. It was all down to the eye of shining justice.
I just don't have the energy for this. If there's anyone I'd entrust my life with, it's you, Morag.
Hello, I'm right here.
I admit that I played a significant role. More battling, less prattling, if you please.
Good work on looking after your drivers, you two.
Sure. Though I think Pandoria has a harder time with that than me.
What do you mean? Zeke has loads of good qualities. Like, Nia, we'll have so much to talk about when we stop for the night.
I'm begging you, please let me get some sleep before it's already bright.
Unflinching resolve and awesome friends. We can't but win.
I kind of admire that you can say stuff like that without feeling embarrassed.
The victory feast will be glorious. We assure you, it shall not disappoint.
I assure you, no one cares.
Mithra, why are you only mean to Rex?
You'd rather I was mean to you?
The way you Nopon speak is so funny. Tora do this, Tora do that.
Tora actually beautiful poet in Nopon language. Not Tora's fault Zeke not understand it. Poppy, are you okay? No damage?
Poppy is just fine, but what about you, Master Pawn?
Aw, look at you two.
Best buddies.
Tora is very handy to have around.
The Nopon on my team could learn a lot from you.
Morag, you gotta teach me your thingy with the blue flames. Snazzy as hell.
Snazzy. I see. I had forgotten that some drivers value style over substance.
Rex, come here! Look at the state of you. You're a total mess.
Don't be too harsh on Rex. I'll soon knock some Ardainian sense into him.
The prince is the same. Last week I had to remind him to put on pants.
You know, Morag, you remind me of my big brother a lot.
Back up there, Fiora. Surely you meant sister.
That's Dunban over there!
Eyes front, Thunderdweeb. Go stare at Pandoria instead.
I'm just making sure the power of the Aegis is being used correctly. Hey, Dromark, you were kind of useful back there.
Thank you. You too functioned adequately.
What are Zeke and Pandoria planning to do after this quest is over?
Clearly, we'll get a
the
daring
prince
new
married.
quest. Huh? My advance cannot be stopped. Such is the destiny of those who bear the eye of shining justice.
I think someone needs to take away your library card.
Praxis, take off that ridiculous eye patch. You're infringing my copyright.
I've got a condition, you poser. Take yours off if it bothers you.
Hey, Crossette, you didn't get hurt, did you?
Oh my gosh, she talked to you. Stay calm, Chrisette. You've got this. Just play it cool. I'm fine. I'm great. Never better. Super healthy. Fire girl power. Yeah!
Mythra, you may find that a little tranquility can go a long way.
How dare you! I'm the very picture of calm.
Hey, Mythra. You look super cute when you're fighting.
Obviously. You're really cute too.
Oh, Aegis, I would not have conceived you thus.
Not what you expected? I'm cute as hell, so who cares?
That was a close one. Thanks for saving my skin, Bromark.
It's not Bromark, it's... You're welcome.
Poppi finally appreciate good points of Zeke.
I have to say, I might need more time before I can appreciate Tora.
Sorry about that. I wasn't paying enough attention.
Don't worry yourself. We all make mistakes.
Oh, diddums. Shall I kiss it better for you?
Stuff a sock in it, clown.
You're really quite wise in the way of the world, aren't you, Hugo? Think you could teach me a few anecdotes?
Are you sure about that? He's quite the stern taskmaster.
If you wish, Laura. By tomorrow, please transcribe 100 pages of one of the Tornan epics. Write a treatise on an Ardainian philosopher of your choice, and read a volume of history.
Sorry. The dog ate all of my literature.
I'm getting some awkward vibes between you and Jin, Laura. Is it complicated?
What? What's that supposed to... There's nothing going on between us. At all.
Don't worry, Lady Laura. I'm still your #1 fan.
It looks like I'm on dinner duty tonight. Does anyone have any requests?
Ooh, do something meaty.
Understood. Steamed vegetables it is.
Oh, wow. Rude.
That was an excellent battle. I should record this in my journal.
Indeed. I'm sure there will be profound insights to be found in the telling.
For sure. Just make sure to note how great I did, okay? Thanks.
You truly are incorrigible, Mythra.
Jin, Aegeon, shouldn't you be happier about our victories? Oh boy.
Thanks for the rescue, Hayes. You're nice.
Oh, a thanks from Mythra? Well, there's something you don't hear every day.
Wow. I take that back. Hayes is the master of low-key shade.
I think you'll agree the victory was undoubtedly mine this time, Mythra.
I just wasn't really feeling it. So I thought, hey, I'll throw you a bone.
You two are such good friends. I must admit I'm a little envious.
That was flashy as hell. Do that again, would you?
I don't see the need to show off without any eligible girls around.
Oh, Midoff, you're so dreamy. Can I have your autograph?
I'll keep talking, funny man. You'll get what's coming to you.
You did good back there, Bridget. Obviously not as good as me, but still.
What was that? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Would you mind repeating the first part again?
Shall I repeat it for you, Bridget? I had no trouble hearing.
Goodness no, Your Majesty.
And so, thanks to the beautiful Mythra, the tale continued.
The player regains control in the most anticlimactic fashion, with a tutorial. I cannot fathom the logic of the developers here. What it's teaching is basically an Easter egg. Ascending the final elevator, our heroes realize just how high they've risen. Not only are they surrounded by stars, but the immediate architecture also resembles that of a space station. In the meantime, Malos fails to murder his creator, who nonchalantly assures him his death is imminent regardless. The Aegis begs one question before heading for Ion. Is his desire truly his own? To which he learns he cannot dissociate from Amalthus. At long last, the party sets foot in the promised land, Elysium, only to find it has become a desolate wasteland. Every trace of life has withered away, with the lone exception of a church bell's tolling. The architect is calling for them, and when following his voice, Rex is suddenly isolated in a sequence of hallucinations. Against his will, he is shifted all over Alrest with a single parallel. No matter where he goes, there is an onslaught of gaslighting over the sacrifices his friends have made for him. They accuse him of betraying their trust and not being deserving of everything he's gained along the way. While these words hit hard, their attacks may hit harder. Morak in particular is challenging. You'll be humbled if you aren't skilled at using an assortment of blade rolls. Funny story, I breezed through these fights in my first playthrough, so when a friend told me they were stuck on Morag, I teased them for it. And ever since then, I have been brutalized in subsequent playthroughs. Karma wins again. And I sure had time to soak in each and every loss during this lengthy walk of shame. There's no relief for victory either, as Gramps bemoans his aimless existence and guilt-trips Rex for taking advantage of it. Just when things seem normal, Rex enters his home to meet Pyra and Mithra in separate bodies. As they prepare for dinner, he also notices that their personalities have flipped. And this is where I'm finally praising their dub voice actor, Sky Bennett. Her voice inflection differs between Pyra and Mithra, and she then combines them flawlessly with Numa. But this case is extra impressive, because she's voicing Pyra and Mithra's impression of each other while still sounding like them individually. That's a tall order for two characters who already sound alike, but Sky absolutely nails it. To me, she is just as iconic as Adam Howden's Shulk. I cannot imagine Pyra and Mithra without her. The scene takes a turn when Rex tries to break up an argument between them. The emotions catch up to him. Imagine how it would feel to have all of your friends acting bizarre, yet are unanimous in blaming you. The architect shows mercy as the charade comes to a close and the group awakens in front of him. These hallucinations were a test of their hearts, and he now understands the fears that each of them repress. The architect introduces himself as Klaus, a scientist from planet Earth. When Earth was under attack, he took matters into his own hands by activating the Conduits, a mysterious entity that served as a gateway to other dimensions. Though most of civilization was transported away, the planet and station remained, now known as Morytha and the World Tree, respectively. Elysium was the station's residential area to settle in while in orbit. Klaus did successfully gain the power of a god, but even that had its caveat. Half of his body disappeared into a distant dimension. Seeking atonement, he first created the Cloud Sea, composed of particles that can restore disassembled matter. He then collected information of previous lifeforms and scattered them across the sea as core crystals. This resulted in a new cycle of life, but he had another trick up his sleeve, the Trinity Processor, 3 AIs that controlled the conduit. While Ontos disappeared, Logos and Numa became the two Aegises. Klaus entrusted them and the Blades to supervise humanity from not repeating his mistakes. Keep in mind, I'm generalizing an enormous lore dump, and I don't mean that as an insult, because it is so intriguing and well thought out. It might seem out of the blue, but there have been gradual hints throughout the story. From core crystals being described with technological terms, to the World Tree's architecture in Amalthus' flashback, and of course, the mere existence of Morytha. Though his plan turned out spectacular, Klaus lost hope in his creations. When he saw mankind was no different from the humans he once knew, he was too dispirited to intervene. To add insult to injury, Klaus will fade away as soon as his other half perishes, a moment he can feel is impending. The conduits will disappear along with him, and since it is the source of the Aegis, he warns Rex that his power will be expiring. He He then experiences an emotion he had long since forgotten: affection, when he transfers Elysium's data to Numa and acknowledges her as Pyra and Mithra. And that affection is reciprocated when the party thanks him for giving them life. All that's left is to put an end to Malus's scheme, but before that, you may have wondered at some point if there were any neat references to Xenoblade 1. Well, I can now tie that loose end since we've covered the bulk of the game. I will be mentioning spoilers, so skip ahead if that is an issue.
Today, we use our power to fell a god, and then seize our destiny!
Zanza, the final boss, is the other half of Klaus. The whole Klaus story even originated in Xenoblade 1. At the time, it felt random and tacked on, but it made for an incredible twist that entwines two seemingly unrelated entries in a franchise. Aside from Noppons, there wasn't anything major connecting the universes of 1 and 2, so to connect it at the end in the most unexpected yet sensible manner is masterful. Even though the premise of Xenoblade 3 confirms 1 and 2's connection, there has continued to be first-time players who are shocked by this twist. That is how mind-blowing it is. There's more where that came from too. There was a woman named Galea who tried to stop Klaus from activating the conduit. Unbeknownst to him, Klaus's wish to meet her again was already taken by his evil half, albeit tragically. Xenoblade 1 takes place on two titans at war, the Bionis and Mechonis. The soul of the Bionis is Zanza, while the soul of the Mechonis is Maineth, the Galea of that world. To top it off, at the end of Xenoblade 1, Alvis reveals himself as the true Monado and formerly an administrative computer, meaning that Alvis is Ontos, the missing Aegis. This is alluded to by Mithra's foresight resembling Shulk's visions, and Malos literally wielding a Monado. Hell, Definitive Edition practically confirmed it by changing Alvis's goofy-ass key into an Aegis core. You know, during my first playthrough, I was thinking Morytha was the planet Earth from Xenoblade X, but boy did I get something much better. And if you really want to get nerdy, there are even allusions to Xenogears in Xenosaga, but that's outside my area of expertise. Besides, the best part about these connections is none of them are necessary to understand, nor are they spoilers. The reveal of Klaus is still amazing in the sole context of Xenoblade 2. Malos begins his assault on Alrest with the artifices under his command. The party arrives to sway him from Amalthus's will, but at last, Malos shows them his true colors.
But that man, he'd lost everything. He no longer wanted anything. He didn't even want to live anymore. And despite that, his life was the one thing he hadn't lost. Because he couldn't!
The thought of you forgetting me, it's like one heart is being ripped in two.
Words can be a curse. That curse was what kept him tied down here. A wretched tale, isn't it? This whole world is a wretched place.
Do not forget that you too are a part of that world. If it were not for you, for Amalthus, both Jin and Laura's lives may have taken quite different paths.
Exactly. That's exactly it. You've gotten smarter with age, huh? I'm a wretched being too. A hideous monster, far beyond saving. So, let's end this now.
Malos takes control of Ion, the ultimate artifice, commencing the final boss battle that I have to admit is slightly underwhelming. The premise and music are awesome, it's the setting that lets them down. Not having direct contact with Ion makes it feel less climatic, and at the very least, the scenery should have been more visually impactful. In terms of the fight itself, the main hurdle is the reinforcements. Surprise, surprise, 3 giant robots may be too much to handle. A clever workaround is sealing reinforcements with the proper blade combo, or you could try building a full burst before things can go downhill. If the player takes too long to win, Ion will unleash its ace in the hole, Prometheus. This is a one-hit KO that isn't guaranteed to hit, but it probably will. As the battle rages on, Rex informs Malos of his importance to Jin. Jin longed for his death due to his lack of bond after Laura, but his partnership with Malos grew into a sincere friendship that became his motivation for living. Malos believes it is far too late to reconcile, but Rex reminds him that he used to think differently. With Alrest on its last legs, Klaus feels his demise approaching and counts on our heroes to prevail.
Today, we use our power to fell a god, and then seize our destiny!
Hurry. The time is nigh.
Rex and Numa land the finishing blow to Ion, deactivating the invading artifices and defeating Malos for good. Inspired by their victory, Klaus grants Alrest an undisclosed last gift, as he and the Conduit vanish. While Malos lies with a shattered core crystal, he wonders how his life would have differed if he had met Rex sooner. Rex regrets not being his driver, but Malos simply laughs it off, accepting his fate. Out of all of the characters in the Xenoblade series, my appreciation for Malos has grown the most throughout each and every playthrough. On the surface, he may seem like the cliché villain with a lust for anarchy, but upon re-examination, it is fascinating how that lust is increasingly overtaken by an existential tragedy. Malos wasn't evil for the sake of it. He could not help but be evil because that's how he was meant to be. The moment he was awoken by Amalthus, he was destined to be an incarnation of his hatred. And that rightfully was haunting. The fear of not being in control of who you really are, and the dread of never being able to. That's why his friendship with Jin was so valuable. To Jin, it was his first bond since Laura, and to Malos, it was his first bond ever, the only thing that proved he was capable of more than his designated purpose. And yet, it was burdened by a cruel irony, as Jin was a walking reminder of how ill-fated Malos was. These emotions came to a head with a fierce juxtaposition where the pinnacle of his chaos was when his ambivalence was most apparent.
Don't you feel anything? Father's sadness, the world he longed for.
How could I? That isn't my role in this world.
No matter what he did, even if it involved God himself, he was doomed to be defined by the circumstances of his birth, and the only solace he could find in the end was acceptance. Although a heartbreaking result, Morak comes to envy it, for his struggle with identity is very much reminiscent of her own. The peril hasn't subsided, however. The World Tree cannot stabilize without the conduits, and is bound to crash all over Alrest. Numa points Rex and the others to a control room, while pulling Gramps and Poppi aside for a favor. Both are anguished by the idea, and Poppi only gives in when reminded of her promise. At their destination, our heroes come to find that there isn't a means to control, but rather to escape. Numa collapses the path back to her, revealing that Alrest must be saved by destroying the World Tree with Ion's fading power. When Rex asks if she'll return, her smile all but confirms his worries. Since his anchor cannot reach, he requests Poppi for help, but she declines in order to maintain the aforementioned promise. Rex begs and pleads with her to not abandon Numa, leaving her in a state of devastating guilt. Gramps tries to quell his desperation, but it's Zeke, of all people, who opens his eyes.
Chum, how long are you planning on being a baby? She's the girl you love. You got to accept her decision. That's what being an adult means.
Morag and Brigid pay their respects to Numa, while Nia and Rex accept that this is the only way. As the situation worsens, Numa transfers her core crystal to Rex, securing the safety of his life, yet ensuring the end of her own. She then disappears behind the rubble, leaving Rex and the others no option but to escape.
Hello there. I hope you'll help me. Rex, I'm so glad to have met you. Our time together was short, a fraction of my long years. But it's been warmer and brighter than any time I can remember before. You shone a light on my melancholy path. You showed me the way. Thank you for that, Rex. Thank you for that gift of light.
The escape pod is unable to handle the tree's explosion, but Numa accounted for this. She manipulated Gramps' core crystal to restore his former glory. The party descends upon the Land of Morytha, with the Cloud Sea and Alrest having mysteriously vanished. Their grief is quickly overturned by way of Klaus's gift, a boundless ocean where the Titans of Alrest can merge into a landmass. As they are welcomed by a parade of embers analogous to shooting stars, Rex looks at Pyra and Mithra's core crystal, assuring them they have finally reached the true Elysium together. The credits then roll, eventually accompanied by their memories as well as the ending theme, One Last You. This time, the lyrics are written from Pyra and Mithra's perspective, reflecting on their journey and asking God for another chance. And as their friends marvel at their glistening new home, they realize it was missing an even brighter light. Pyra and Mithra alive individually. Some will say their return hampers the emotional weights, while others feel even more emotional at the sight of them. Believe it or not, I was among the former. I hated this final twist because I hate the fake sacrifice trope. It's drama for the sake of drama, and the survival is often a stretch. But then I processed the events and rewatched the ending, and despite knowing they survive, I still can't help but cry, even as I write this. Just listening to the music makes me tear up. And that's not just because it's such an excellent scene, it's also because I realized it isn't about their supposed death. So to those who empathize with my knee-jerk reaction, allow me to delve into those assumptions and why they're incorrect. Pyra and Mithra's survival can be explained by two theories that aren't mutually exclusive, yet are in my opinion fulfilling on their own. As the ending theme suggests, Pyra and Mithra were a part of Klaus's gift. Their core crystal reanimates as soon as they enter the new world, and the heavenly embers are what cause it to resonate. Logically speaking, there's no way Klaus didn't know they'd have to sacrifice themselves, and I'd like to think he wouldn't let them die. They clearly struck an impression on him that he wasn't expecting, and while they began as two sides of the same coin, they grew into their own. And although Rex once considered them the same person, his opinion became the opposite. Remember, during Klaus's trial, Rex wasn't thrown off by them being in separate bodies, he was thrown off by them not acting like themselves. This ownership of identity culminates when Klaus corrects himself from saying Numa and instead calls them Pyra and Mithra. Klaus is neither good nor evil, not taking a side until the end, but there are consequences to inaction. By all means, he never quite earned the faith that Pyra and Mithra have in him, so I would like to believe that he finally rewarded it. But if that's too convenient or cheesy for you, here's the second take. Since the conduit no longer exists, the Aegis's power is no more. Pyra and Mithra were able to swap because of that power, so perhaps now they function as normal blades, albeit a 2-in-1 package. And as we know, a blade will return to their core crystal as long as it is intact. Now that sparks a much more interesting dilemma. Did Pyra and Mithra lose their memories? The answer is intentionally ambiguous and therefore debated to this day. Personally, I don't think it's that complicated. All you need to do is look at the characters. Poppi's elation gets the most attention, but it's irrelevant to the conversation. With how much guilt she felt earlier, she was always going to be ecstatic. Pyra and Mithra's reaction is also understandable. Whether or not they remember Poppi, they're inherently kind-hearted and have been proven to have a soft spot for the youth. On the contrary, why does Rex appear hesitant instead of equally overjoyed? And why would he need the encouragement of Nia and the others? It's as if he realizes that this isn't a reunion, but rather an introduction, and thus boy met girl. I actually adore how bittersweet that would be, because in a sense, the Pyra and Mithra they knew really did die. I would not be surprised to find the truth in Xenoblade 3, but nonetheless, there's much more to the ending than the sacrifice itself. As grand as it was, the sacrifice was an opportunity for the characters to find closure. Poppi had been naturally becoming human-like, and that comes to fruition because she is the most human character in this ending. She goes through an emotional roller coaster of her own, from terror to guilt to sadness to regret to finally happiness. The fear on her face when Rex is begging her to help him is heartbreaking. She is telling herself that it's her fault that Pyra and Mithra are going to die. But then it happens. Rex reaches out his hand to Poppi with Numa's appropriate quote, and the music picking up, I break down every time. I'm having chills right now. It's such a brief yet powerful moment. Zeke went through a mini redemption arc. He was at a loss for words in Chapter 7 when emotions ran high, yet he ends up being the one to tell Rex exactly what he needs to hear. As unexpected as it is, his words come from experience. Due to the Elpis's effects, he wanted Pandoria to stay behind and not suffer, but she was adamant about not leaving him and he came to accept her decision. Yes, I am implying that Zeke loves Pandoria, and perhaps that epiphany is part of her surprise. It would explain why she's openly cozy with him afterwards. Did you notice that Turters was there, by the way? The lesson Zeke teaches isn't all that Rex learns. Rex is a stubborn kid with naive optimism. He believes he can overcome an obstacle if he doesn't give up. At times, it's for the worse, most notably Van Damme's death and Mythra's awakening. But usually it's for the better, as he is a role model to Tora and Poppi, and his persistence is what saved Nia, Pyra, and Mythra. Rex's optimism is precious to his friends, but it was only a matter of time until he needed to give up. Thanks to Numa's sacrifice, he comes to accept that sometimes he can't do anything about it. He doesn't have a say in everything. Some things are just out of your control, and that is a crucial lesson for an adult. And by learning it, he saved his own life. But above all else, the ending gave closure to Pyra and Mythra. Traumatized by the Aegis War, they were so willing to protect others that they wanted to get rid of themselves. Pyra was even created because that's how much Mythra despised herself. Together, they viewed their power as a burden to their loved ones as well as the entire world. But as Van Damme once said, power depends on the heart of its wielder. In a way, she did get to die for the sake of others, but it wasn't a suicide as once desired. It wasn't a plea for a way out. It was a sacrifice, one that was devoid of self-loathing, fear, and regret. No longer did she hate herself for being a weapon to destroy, for she was finally able to accept herself as the power to protect. Just like the whole game, the ending may be confusing at first and will take time to digest, but the more I experience it and reflect on it, the more I love it. It is a phenomenal conclusion to a complex adventure, and it's my personal favorite in a video game. Xenoblade 2 ages like fine wine, so I hope you've gotten used to its taste. Underneath its frivolous appearance is a remarkable story about identity, existentialism, and trauma. And in exchange for a learning curve is a game that gives back each and every inch of what you put in and more. While there are undeniably rough edges, Xenoblade 2 is more than the sum of its parts. There is nothing else like it. Monolith Soft had a unique vision, and they did everything they could to realize it, even if it meant some aspects were divisive. It is unapologetically what it is, and you've got to respect that. For nearly 5 years, it has been my favorite video game, but I would never say it's for everyone. I mean, we all have our own tastes, and some like to be more annoying about it than others, so spare me a moment to be sentimental. Special thanks to everyone who got into Xenoblade in preparation for 3, especially the streamers. This took countless hours of every day of my last few months, but what kept me going was not only my love for the series, but also the joy from watching first playthroughs on Twitch and YouTube. You guys kept reminding me, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that Xenoblade 2 is indeed special. Whether you're a player or a viewer, I hope to see you around for Xenoblade 3. I am confident it will be the best one yet. Thank you for spending your time on this video. Thank you for listening to someone geek out about their favorite game, and most of all, thank you for being curious.